people, when we say Afro-American, they think only of the Negroes in the United States, but they don't realize that 2/3 of Brazil consists of people of African blood, which means they're also Afro-American because Brazil is in South America. And in all of these, many of these countries in South America and Central America, and even in Canada, they are heavily populated with people whose ancestors came from Africa. So when you total up the number of Afro-Americans, real Afro-Americans, in the Western Hemisphere, there are perhaps 100 million. And if these people ever unite among themselves, not only is it necessary for the Afro-Americans in the United States to be organized, but it's also necessary for the Afro-Americans in the Caribbean, or the Afro-Cubans, the Afro-Brazilians. It's necessary for all of them to be organized. And then once they are organized in each place, we have to organize among ourselves so that the Afro-American in the United States will be working in conjunction in a coordinated program with those who are in Cuba and those in Brazil and those in Venezuela and those throughout the Caribbean and Haiti and in the West Indian Islands. And in this way, we actually get strength. And it's not an accident that there's no organization existing in the Western Hemisphere that's designed toward that end. It would be a direct threat to imperialism as it really exists and to colonialism as it exists in the West. And one of the things that's going to help to bring this about is the independence of Africa. One of the only reasons that we in the West have never organized, we have hated our image and our African image. And because Africa has been in the hands of people who have created an image of Africa that's negative and hateful. And it has been hateful to us. We haven't wanted to identify with it. But now that Africa is getting independent and in a position to create its own image, and it's a positive image, those of us in the West look at the African image and see how positive it is. We begin to identify with it. We become proud of Africa, and we become proud of our African blood, our African heritage. And this is what is beginning to make the Africans in the Western Hemisphere today develop more race pride. And as this race pride develops, then it has a tendency to make us want to unite together and work together. And your Western imperialists and colonialists consider this to be a grave threat. More threat than communism or Marxism or socialism or anything else. The Africanism is what they consider to be the real threat.
Yes. African Americans who are so-called Negroes. One of the reasons that it is bad for us to continue to just refer to ourselves as so-called Negro, that's negative. When we say so-called Negro, that's pointing out what we aren't, but it isn't telling us what we are. We are African, and we happen to be in America. We're not American. We are people who formerly were Africans who were kidnapped and brought to America. Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us. We were brought here against our will. We were not brought here to be made citizens. We were not brought here to enjoy the constitutional gifts that they speak so beautifully about today. And because we weren't brought here to be made citizens today, now that we've become awakened to some degree and we begin to ask for those things which they say are supposedly for Americans, they look upon us with hostility and unfriendliness. So our unwanted presence, the fact that we are unwanted, is becoming magnified in all of America's preachments today.
Ten down worry, Uncle Justin, live life, prosperity, and health, as spoken in the ancient Kemetic language. Hotep means peace, Rastafari, African power for all African people. Kings and queens, blessings. Thank you for joining me. This is Tafazwa Shakara Bandaka, live and in session. Let's give me some nines in the chat. Let me know that you can hear me quickly. You know what I'm saying? I also want to make sure my voice is coming through loud and very, very clear. Just let me know you can hear my voice loud and clear. You know what I mean? Coming through. Give me some nines in the chat or some red, black, and green, as some of you have already done. I give thanks for all of that. You done know. Yeah, it's love kings and queens, you know. We're feeling it right about now. And yeah, it's going to be a good one today, you know what I'm saying? Stay tuned for anyone who wants to join this particular conversation. You will be given an opportunity to do so. You will be given an opportunity to do so a little bit later on. And yeah, I'm going to begin by giving a bit of an introduction to why we're here. This topic right about now, you know what I'm saying? What's wrong? What's wrong? What is wrong with being African? You get me? What is wrong with that? We want to know today. Yeah, what's wrong with being African? You get me? That's the levels right about now. Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna be going through some stuff, including doing a little bit of a presentation in a set, you know what I mean? And we're gonna get into some things. All right, I want to share some information with the family, you know what I'm saying? And let me just you get me, like turn on my camera for a bit so heads can, you know, have a bit more of an interactive experience. All right, okay, all right, family, blessings. Yeah, so we're gonna go in. All right, so why am I doing this particular subject right here? The reason is because for the last couple years, there have been a number of movements out here recently that have kind of challenged the foundation of African identity. Yeah, kind of challenged the foundation of African identity. And so now some of these things are basically, well, I'd say it started a few years ago with this anti-Hotep vibration that kind of started kicking up, say about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. And ever since then, there's been a rise in, like, you know, I'd say in chronological order, I'd say the Black Hebrews, which they've been there for a long time still, but there's a particular, and I want to make this clear, where the Black Hebrews are concerned, Hebrew Israelites, not all of them are in the category that I'm about to mention. Yeah, big up to Abba Ben Ami, you know what I'm saying, who departed us a few years ago. But you know, the African Hebrew Israelites would not qualify for what it is I'm about to say. But there are many groups, yeah, that consider themselves Black Hebrews that are very hostile towards Africa, African identity, and things African. Yeah. And then following that, now you had this whole pop up in the last year or two of the Aborigine movement. Yeah. And basically these are Black people around the Americas, because at one point I thought this was just the United States of America. I was wrong. Yeah, I learned that this was going well beyond that. Yeah, so and it's in the Caribbean as well, but they don't believe that we are African, that we come from the African continent, and these things. Yeah. And then recently, yeah, sorry, these people believe that we are the indigenous people of the Americas. And in interacting with some of them, I came to observe that it wasn't just that they thought that we were this like original to the Americas. Yeah. All of us, you know what I'm saying? Like, well, it's original to the Americas. There's again another particular kind of hostility towards Africa and a rejection of African identity, yeah, that I found, you know, proliferated through what, you know, their whole philosophy, their whole ideology. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that I found particularly interesting. Then in the last year or two, also, it's been the African descendants of slaves, African descendants of slavery. And again, this whole narrative that rejects African identity, whilst acknowledging that we have an ancestral connection to Africa, but for some reason, the idea that we have an African identity is abhorrent to these people for some, you know, whatever reason. And in that respect, there is a narrative that begins with the idea that our brothers and sisters on the continent sold us into slavery, that is designed to sever us from experiencing and being allegiant to an African identity. Yeah. So, you know, going through, seeing all these dynamics, and I'm thinking, but the commonality between all of these things is a rejection of African identity, yeah? And coming with this narrative is, oh, yeah, I forgot to say, Kings and Queens, do like up the video, you know what I'm saying? You know, do want to call house cleaning and everything there. Do like up the video, share the link and all these things, you know what I mean? Share it far and wide. Yeah, you know, I didn't even promote this one as much as I promote my other ones, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, share out the link, family, share out the link, you know what I'm saying? Big up to my people in the chat. Big up to I Love Soil, Do You? Big up to Sister Yemaya, you done know, sis. Blessings, good to see you. Kaz Rudy is in the house. Kojo, the African, bless up, my brother. I'm gonna read your comment in a bit, yeah. I'm gonna read your comment in a bit. All right. And I believe Sister Melanated and Belize Bang is also in the house. All right. Yes, family, share up the thing and like up the video as well. Make sure we can spread this African energy all about the place, all through the land of YouTube and the World Wide Web. Yeah. So what was particularly apparent to me when I look at all of these things that I've just mentioned is that the actual rejection of African identity was not necessary. Yeah. It didn't bear any relevance to whatever identity that they were trying to assert. Yeah. Except for the fact that they would be challenged by people who would say that they're African. And then they could just have a conversation about whether or not they're African. But there's a particular kind of hostility, yeah, to the African identity that, to me, is coming from somewhere else, yeah? You have narratives associated with this then that try to paint those who affirm an African identity as living in some kind of utopia, harping on about outdated political ideologies, not having a political ideology and being engaged in kind of self-aggrandizement, feel-good cultural nationalism and these kinds of things, yeah? So just meditating on this, yeah, I figured, well, what's wrong with being African? And so I figured to just do a little session on this whole concept of an African identity and where it comes from, and the purpose it has served, yeah, in Black, you know, culture, Black politics, Black economics, for the last few hundred years. Where does it come from? Yeah, because one of the things that is also apparent within all of these narratives is that they never give a proper appraisal of this. Yeah, they never give a proper appraisal of this. You hear statements like, well, the white man named us African. And these, which is not true, this is what I was saying. So, and then all of this effectively is designed to delegitimize the idea, the mission, the goal, the ideology of Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism asserts a oneness of identity among African people across the diaspora. Pan-Africanism asserts a cultural unity, yeah, of African people across the diaspora. Okay, and so we're gonna go into this a bit right about now, and yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen, and hopefully everyone can see it. So when I share my screen, family, I'd like for you to just do me a favor and let me know that you can see it. Yeah, hit the 9 button when I share my screen, and just let me know so you can see when I try to show you. All right, we're gonna go in right about now. So right, let's get this, set up this thing nice and easy. Once again, whilst you're here, if you're just coming in, welcome, welcome, welcome. Do hit the like button, share the link, you know what I mean? Share the link, and I will be facilitating a conversation after I've just gone through, you know, a few points of history, historical, cultural reference for us all. And yeah, I look forward to you joining me in the conversation in a bit. Right, let me share up the screen, little piece, so you can see where I go on. Popcorn, share screen, right, yeah, share up the thing, you know, share up the thing. Okay, so now we'll share up the thing. Yes, family, just hit the 9 button for quality control so I can make sure that everybody can see where I go on. Hit the 9 button for me, family, if you can see my screen, so that I can make sure that everything's running nice and smooth. Yeah, give thanks. My brother M.A. Brown is in the house. Blessings, brother. You get me? Yes, I. All right, we're gonna go in. Yeah, so I'm just gonna deliver some information here that pertains, yeah, to the historical relevance of the African identity, yeah, in today's world, what it means, yeah, how it came about, and the purposes, because all identities are designed to fulfill a particular purpose. So we're going to go into that right about now. I'm keeping it very short. I'm not going to do my usual definition of this and definition of that, because normally what I do is define identity and, you know what I'm saying, explain what that is and what it means and the implications of identity in the social structure, formation of society, subculture, and all these things. We're gonna bypass all of that and leave that for another presentation. We're just going to go through briefly some historical points, yeah? So really what I'm doing here now is just demonstrating where the term African begins to be used, yeah, specifically in the English speaking world, okay, and in what context it begins to be used. Now, according to most historical records, this is the first point at which Africans begin to self-define as African. What's important to know at this particular juncture is that the number one terminology used to refer to African people, black people during this time is Negro and nigger. Yeah, so we wasn't really referred to as African at this point, but the continent of Africa was referred to as Africa. Okay, so we have here Ignatius Sancho, yeah, 1729 to 1780. Okay, so we're not even dealing with the 1800s yet. This is the 18th century. Okay, and he is believed to have been born, yeah, on a so-called slave ship traveling from Africa to the West Indies. He ends up in London, in fact, in this country that I now sit in, and he begins to start writing. Yeah, he is in some kind of business in the city of London. He begins to start writing letters, yeah, and these letters were compiled into a collection and published in a book called The Letters of the Late Ignatius Sancho, an African. Okay, and the reason why it was titled that, yeah, is because when he wrote letters, he used to sign his letters off an African or Africanus, yeah. So he used to identify himself with Africa and Africanness and African identity, and used to write in a favorable way about Africa, even though he had never really been there. Yeah, this is the same for Phyllis Wheatley now, who during this point, well, obviously she's born into slavery 1753, and she begins to start writing poetry. Now at this point, America, there's no nation called the United States of America. It's a colony of Britain, yeah. And so this is the reason why these two are kind of simultaneous with each other, because they represented the axis of the British Empire during this period, and so their literature, the things that they wrote, proliferated around the empire, became known throughout the empire, so she begins to start writing poetry. And her book, of collective works, poems on various subjects, religious and moral, was published in 1773. Again, same, commonality. Yeah, she refers to herself as African and the race Afrique. Yeah. Or the sable race Afrique is a term that she uses, and she also is also referring to Africa in a positive light, and somewhat contradictory, because she was indoctrinated into slavery and so believed that kind of Christianity was a saving influence upon herself and Africans in general. But still, this was the first time that white authors were experiencing Africa and Africans being written about in a positive light, especially because it came from Africans ourselves, people who had been taught that Africa had no history and had nothing to offer the world. Yeah, moving swiftly on, one of arguably the first actual black activist organization to have developed in the UK is the Sons of Africa, yeah, which was founded, among others, by Otaba Kugwano and Olaoda Equiano, yeah, both Africans who had European names but asserted and affirmed an African identity, one, through the reclamation of their names, and two, through referring to themselves as African. Okay, both these individuals would refer to themselves as African. Olaoda Equiano is another one who would sign off his letters and refer to himself as an African. And I'm not going to read through all the notes on here, but note the name of the organization, the Sons of Africa. These are two Africans from West Africa, yeah, and are beginning to they set a trend in terms of forming an organization that identified with the entire continent, okay, the entire continent, and also were affirming an African identity. So we're going to get from here on. I'm going to be a little bit more detailed, yeah, just a little bit more detailed. This is a brother by the name of Richard B. Moore, and yeah, he is an activist born in the late 1800s. And so he's an activist. He becomes a member of a number of Black nationalist organizations, and he also joins the Socialist Workers' Party, but is actually kicked out because he's a bit too Black nationalist. He's also a member of the African Blood Brotherhood, which is a contemporary organization to that of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. Yeah, and so, you know, though a Black nationalist, Richard B. Moore also is a bit of a critic of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and you know what I mean, but you know, somebody who's committed to the uplift of Black people and African people in general. He's also, well, let me come back to what I was just about to say. All right, this is reading from a paper that he wrote in 1963 called African Consciousness in Harlem. He's dealing with the history of Africans identifying with an African identity. Yeah, he says consciousness of their ancestral homeland has thus been historically evident from the first arrivals, when some of these Africans brought as slaves into the Americas killed themselves, believing that they would thereby return to Africa. The most famous incident of this is known as the Igbo suicide something or another, but a group of Igbo Africans on a ship being brought from Africa, basically mutinied on the ship, took over the reins of the ship, and you know, basically kill off all of the crew, and instead of being enslaved, yeah, when they met up on land, they all just collectively just walked into the sea and drowned, yeah, because they refused to be enslaved. And so that's just actually one story, one particular incident, yeah, like this, because you know, we hear of others. We hear of the stories of Africans just throwing themselves overboard, for example, and these kinds of things. But going on with this particular article, awareness of their heritage, of culture and dignity continued during the colonial period and the early days of this republic. Yeah, so now we're going into from now the last quarter year of the 1700s. So we're going from the transition of America being a British colony to the American Revolution and the organizations now that African people in America began to develop. The name African was then preferred and used instead of the slave master's degrading epithet Negro. Witnessed thus the Free African Society, founded in Philadelphia. This is the forerunner of the African Protestant Episcopal Church of St. Thomas, which is in the Caribbean. Also the American Methodist Episcopal Church. Note also the African Lodge of Prince Hall Masons in Boston. African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, which is different now from the African Methodist Episcopal Church. African Society for Mutual Aid. African Grove Playhouse in New York, and many so named throughout the country. Yeah, so what begins to happen is that not just in the United States of America, but throughout the Americas, yeah, you begin to see the development, yeah, of Black organizations starting to flourish, yeah, at the end of the 1700s, or should I say in the last quarter of the 1700s. So this is now the first period in which Africans are forming official organizations, yeah, in the Americas as a part during the enslavement experience. Okay, and so we're talking about not just what would become the United States of America. We're talking about the Caribbean as well, noting that a lot of these churches, especially the Baptist ones, linked up throughout the Caribbean and North America. Yeah, so even as far as Canada, these organizations were being developed. The important thing to also note is that these are all developing independent of each other, so they're not related. Yeah, one of them is not necessarily catching inspiration from the other, except for the fact that there is speculation as to the degree to which the writings of Phyllis Wheatley, Olaudah Equiano, Ottobah Cugoano, and Ignatius Sancho had proliferated the Americas in terms of African people during that time. There's speculation. Nobody actually knows the extent of the influence. Yeah, but for you know, to all intents and purposes, most of this is taking place independently of each other. So what's happening is that when these Africans are developing organizations of political, economic, and social uplift and spiritual ritualistic experience, noting that all of these things are not necessarily separate and distinct from each other. Yeah, so the church was also advocating on behalf of African people and trying to liberate, abolish slavery, working for social, economic, and political uplift. Okay, so then these are not all mutually exclusive ideas, and as far as these organizations are concerned. But as soon as we start to self-organize, the identity that we adopt and affirm is African. Think about that. Yeah, this is before the American Revolution now. Yeah, so there's no a self-defined, affirmed identity called American as yet. Not to say that there's no white people in America affirming Americanness at all. My point is that among Africans, even as white America was self-affirming as American, black people in America and throughout the Americas were self-defining as African. Okay. Richard B. Moore goes on, as early as 1788, an organized body of Afro-Americans, and note the use of this word. This article was written in 1963, yeah? And Richard B. Moore is noted as being one of the earliest proponents and advocates of the terminology African-American and the rejection of just American or Negro in particular, yeah? And even black, he wasn't even fond of the use of the term black to refer to Africans, yeah? So note the use of this term, Afro-Americans, yeah? So this is being used already, okay? In Newport, which included Paul Coffey, who was soon to make history in this respect, wrote to the Free African Society of Philadelphia proposing a plan for emigration to Africa. What he means by Paul Coffey making history in this respect, Paul Coffey is noted as one of the first Africans to actually take Africans back to Africa. We should note that thousands of African men, women, and children made the journey back to Africa, repatriated back to Africa between the 17 and throughout the 1800s. Thousands, and possibly tens of thousands. Okay, right, so moving on now, 1787, yeah. Prince Hall, who is the founder of one of the aforementioned organizations, which is the African Masonic Lodge, yeah, presented a petition to the government of Massachusetts, Boston, Massachusetts, yeah, which is said to have been presented by a number of African blacks, yeah, of the Masonic Lodge, and it reads thusly: "We or our ancestors have been taken from our dear connections and brought from Africa and put into a state of slavery in this country." Let me pause right there. Let me pause right there. Why am I pausing? When he says we or our ancestors, I want to emphasize the fact that when he says we, he means that there are people among this group who were not born in the Americas, but were born on the African continent. There are people among this group who have knowledge to memory of the African continent. Yeah? So I'm emphasizing that because many people believe that this identity of African is exclusively the domain of Africans who were ripped from Africa and had no knowledge of it and in an attempt to define themselves with no knowledge of the continent, yeah, they come up with this African thing. No, this was the definition that was coined, yes, and affirmed by Africans who were born on the continent, yeah. And so if they're affirming this African identity collectively because they understand that they come from different parts of the continent, but they're affirming a collective identity. I'm going to go on, we're going to come back to that in a second. All right. From which unhappy situation we have been lately, in some measure delivered by the new constitution, which has been adopted by the state or by a free act of our former masters. That's what he's referring to there. Is obviously the success of the American Revolution in 1776, yeah, from which unhappy situation, yeah, we have been lately in some measure, he says, delivered by the new constitution which has been adopted by the state. And what they basically mean is that obviously the American Constitution, the American ideal was that all men are supposed to be created equal and free, and land of the free, home of the brave. All these concepts are floating in the air. Some Africans were promised to be liberated, made free, if they fought on behalf of both sides of the fight, to be honest with you, the British side and the American Revolutionist or Republican side. And to some degree, some of that did take place. Some were able to quote unquote buy their freedom and whatever else like that. Yeah, that's what he means by this. Okay, yeah. So or by a free act of our former masters, but we yet to find ourselves in many respects in very disagreeable and disadvantageous circumstances. Most of which must attend us, so long as we and should be our children live in America. So basically what he's saying is, all right, there's some modicum of, freedom of one, as post 1776 than there was pre-1776, but still we're in disagreeable and disadvantageous circumstances. Yeah, they go on. This and other considerations, which we need not here particularly mention, induce us earnestly to desire to return to Africa, our native country, which warm climate is much more natural and agreeable to us, for which the God of nature has formed us, and where we shall live among our equals and be more comfortable and happy. That we can be in our presence, we can be in our present situation, and at the same time may have the prospect of usefulness to our brethren there. Right. Again, I want you to note, one, the affirmation of African identity, the collective tie to a group of ancestors, yes, and the unified commonality that is being shared in terms of common experience, yeah, common history, and common destiny that is being affirmed by this particular petition. Okay. Also note that in the affirmation of African identity, this is actual activism that is going on. So the two examples that we have so far, when Africans are affirming African identity, they're not just doing it just to feel good. They're not just doing it because it makes them feel nice and to hold on to an illusionary utopian ideal of what Africa means and represents. This is them affirming an African identity for the purpose of enacting what they consider to be a liberation or freedom agenda on behalf of Black people. Let's move on. This leads us humbly to propose the following plan to the consideration of this honorable court. The soil of the native country, Africa, is good and produces the necessities of life in great abundance. There are large tracts of uncultivated lands, which, if proper application were made of them, it is presumed might be obtained and would be freely given for those to settle upon, who shall be disposed to return to them. When this shall be effected by a number of Blacks sent there for this purpose, who shall be thought most capable of making such applications and transacting business, then they who are disposed to go and settled there shall form themselves into a civil society united by a political constitution in which they shall agree. So what they're proposing is that they have organized a group of people that are willing to go to Africa and, you know, basically check out the terrain, see what opportunities are over there for the Africans in America. Yeah, come back, make whatever arrangement needs to be made over there, come back, get the rest of us so that we can go. Yeah, but they're affirming this because they want basically self-reliance in this process. Okay, they want to enact self-reliance in the process. They're saying we're going to control the process by which we move from Yassa to Dessa. Yeah, all right, but these must be furnished with necessary provisions for the voyage and with farming utensils necessary to cultivate the land and with the materials which cannot at present be obtained there and which will be needed to build houses and mills. What you've just read, or what I have just read there, is defined as reparations. That is part of a reparations claim. We're going to move. You have disenfranchised us in America. You must therefore enable us, yeah, with the provisions that we need to travel over there, even as we control the process via which we go over there. Return to Africa, that is. Okay, now we're going to move on to Martin DELANY. All right, Martin DELANY, here's a few facts. Again, this is a man born in the United States, but his maternal grandparents are Mandinka in the Niger area. His paternal grandparents are from Gola people from Liberia, what is now known as Liberia. He wrote The Condition, Elevation, Emigration, and Destiny of the Colored People of the United States, Politically Considered. It was published in 1852. The word African, yeah, is regularly used in this document to refer to Black people. The word African is regularly, yeah, not sometimes, regularly used in this document to refer to African people. So again, he's a feminine African identity, but note that the title of the paper, The Condition, Elevation, Emigration, and Destiny of the Colored People of the United States, Politically Considered. Yeah. In it, he proposes that African people should migrate to Central America, yeah, and build up a nation there. The whole point is about developing an African or Black nation in the Western Hemisphere, and basically leaving Outer Babylon, which would have been considered the United States at that time. Okay, I should just note here, it's not in the presentation, but this has a point. David Walker. David Walker's appeal, yeah, was also another document that could have been considered here, which was published in the 1830s, but he also affirms a collective Black and African identity in that document. Martin DELANY spent 9 months. He actually traveled to the African continent and spent 9 months there meeting with indigenous chiefs across West Africa. Signed an agreement with 8 chiefs in the Abeokuta region in Nigeria, allowing repatriates to live on unused land and use their knowledge and skill for the community good. We're going to come back to that, so stay tuned. But I was going to quote something from another of Martin DELANY's papers or essays entitled The Political Destiny of the Colored Race on the American Continent. Yeah. Right. Well, big up everybody in the chat. Big up everyone that's just joining the thing. Big up my brother Kemo. Blessings, my king. And you don't know. Yeah, like up the video, family. You know what I'm saying? If you're not doing that, and feel free to share the link far and wide, right? Quote from Martin DELANY. He says, "Let it be understood as a great principle of political economy that no people can free themselves who themselves do not constitute an essential part of the ruling element of the country in which they live. Whether this element be founded upon true or false or just or an unjust basis, this position in community is necessary for the personal safety, for their personal safety. The liberty of no man is secure who controls not his own political destiny. What is true of the individual is true of a family, And what is true of a family is also true concerning a whole people. To suppose otherwise is that delusion which at once induces its victim through a period of long suffering patiently to submit to every species of wrong, trusting against probability and hoping against all reasonable grounds of expectation for the granting of privileges and enjoyments of rights which will never be attained. This delusion reveals the true secret of the power which holds in peaceable subjection all the oppressed in every part of the world. A bit of context here. At this point, what's taking place is that there's a debate going on among Africans in America. Yeah. And on one side, there's Martin Delaney. The two most prominent figures, as history would have it, is Martin Delaney and Frederick Douglass. Yeah. Both great men. All right. Both great men. Okay. We're not taking anything away from Frederick Douglass, even as we affirm the principle of Martin Delaney at this moment in time. Yeah. But following 1776 and the American Revolution, obviously, because of the more Africans begin to be enticed into what is called, you know, an American identity, especially because there's a number of quote unquote free blacks who are looking for concessions and attainment and affluence within American society. And the other side of this is saying, no, bun that, we're not even looking for that. We're looking for our own independent nationhood. Martin Delaney is one such leading this charge. David Walker, who I previously mentioned, was another such leading this charge. So I'm just giving you the context here through which Martin Delaney is speaking. So when he talks about hoping against all reasonable grounds of expectation for the granting of privileges and enjoyment of rights, yeah, which will never be attained, he's talking about ingratiating oneself with the American system and what it means to be American. Let us be clear. All right. I mean, my brother Scattered, announcing your entry because you don't know you're a done gargan. You know what I'm saying? You're allowed to do that, my brother. You get me? Welcome. You know what I'm saying? Can get started right now, you know. When Scattered Minds reaching the place, things can really get started. You know what I mean? All right. He goes on. A people to be free. Listen to this. A people to be free must necessarily be their own rulers. That is, each individual must in himself embody the essential ingredient, so to speak, of the sovereign principle which composes the true basis of his liberty. This principle, when not exercised by himself, may at his pleasure be delegated to another, his true representative. I'm going to go on. To be successful, our attention must be turned in a direction towards those places where the black and colored man comprise by population and constitute by necessity of members the ruling elements of the body politic, and where, when the occasion shall require it, the issue can be made and maintained on this basis, where our political enclosure and national edifice can be reared, established. Oh my days, forgive me for the spelling mistake, I can't remember what this was supposed to be, I apologize. And proudly defended on this great elementary principle of original identity. Original identity, where our political enclosure and national edifice can be reared, established, and proudly defended on this great elementary principle of original identity. Upon this solid foundation rests the fabric of every substantial political structure in the world, which cannot exist without it. He's talking about original identity here. And so soon as a people or nation lose their original identity, just so soon must that nation or people become extinct. Powerful though they may have been, they must fall, because the nucleus which heretofore held them together becoming extinct, their being no longer a center of attraction or basis for a union of the parts, a dissolution must as naturally ensue as the result of the neutrality of the basis of adhesion among the particles of matter. Yeah. So what he's affirming here, what he's affirming here is that the basic principle for nation building is identity, and what he calls original identity, more specifically. So Africans, therefore, must build and develop according to an original identity, which he is affirming and others are affirming as African, which is the collective expression of the various peoples from which we come on the continent. Yeah, the experience that we carry, having been trafficked across the Atlantic Ocean, yes, understanding also that those cultures become unified, so to speak, in a unified expression most naturally. And we're going to come back to that in a little bit, kings and queens. All right? Okay. We're going to go on just to explain a few things. Right. Search for a Place. This is a book written by Martin DeLaney and Robert Campbell. Yeah, these are the two brothers who actually went on this expedition to West Africa. Okay, and whilst they were in Nigeria, they met with a number of chiefs of the Yoruba nation, specifically of the Egba subgroup, and they actually wrote and signed a treaty. All right. And the first article of this treaty, they went on behalf of a group called the Niger Valley Exploration Party, and this treaty was signed in 1860. In fact, it was signed in 1859, but was published in 1860. Article first, that the king and chiefs on their part agreed to grant and assign unto the said commissioners on behalf of the African race in America the right and privilege of settling in common with the Eba people on any part of the territory belonging to Abeokuta not otherwise occupied. Yeah, this is now the agreement, the first article of agreement between the Niger Valley Exploration Party and the Eba chiefs and kings. Article second, that all matters requiring legal investigation among the settlers be left to themselves to be disposed of according to their own customs. So they're just asking for some space and leeway to manage their own matters among themselves. Yeah? And this was agreed to. Article third, that the commissioners on their part also agree that the settlers shall bring with them. Yeah, so this is what the Africans from the Americas now are promising to bring with them to what later became known as Nigeria. Bearing in mind now, there is nothing called Nigeria at this point. Nigeria is not a thing, yeah, at this point. But African identity and the desire to develop African nationhood is a thing. Okay? All right. Nigeria would not become a thing until 1914. Okay. And I should also point out at this point that Robert Campbell is actually born in the Caribbean. Yeah, he's actually an African from the Caribbean. Okay, so it's an African from the United States and an African from the Caribbean. All right, right. So let's bring with them as an equivalent for the privileges above accorded. So basically, they've been granted land. Yeah, what they're gonna bring in exchange for this land is intelligence, education, and knowledge of the arts and sciences, agriculture, and other mechanical and industrial occupations, which they shall put into immediate operation by improving the lands and in other useful vocations. What is the context for this? The context for this is thus. Read Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Yeah. And he outlines the systematic way in which the colonizers disenfranchised our people on the motherland from the necessary preparation to be masters of our own destiny. yeah, deficient education, just as much as it will allow European nations to rob and benefit off the extreme mineral wealth, yeah, of the land and these kinds of things. So this is what is meant by underdevelopment. Now, obviously, at this point, America, yeah, is trying to fuel what is called an industrial revolution and them kind of things there. So there's a lot of skilled labor in the Americas. There is much skilled labor from Africans in the Americas, and not to say that there's no skilled labor in Africa now, but this is what the Africans from America are promising to bring to you know, this land, yeah, among the Eba people, in reflection of the fact that they are being granted land. Article 4, which is the final article, that the laws of the Eba people shall be strictly respected by the settlers. These are the Africans coming from the Americas. And in all matters in which both parties are concerned, an equal number of commissioners mutually agreed upon shall be appointed, who shall have power to settle such matters. Yeah. So now they're just promising basically to abide by the laws of the Eba people. Okay. All right. These are the names of the people that signed the treaty. As a pledge of our faith and in the sincerity of our hearts, we, each of us, hereunto affix our hands and seals. This 27th day of December, Anno Domini AD 1859. Yeah, family. These are the names of the people that signed the petition. Okukenu Alaka, Samoye Ibasharun, Sokenu Balogun, Ogunbona Balogun, Atambala Balogun, Ogunseye Anaba. This name, it was at least my pronunciation, you know. And Tabo Balogun Ose, Ogundemu Ayeoko, Martin Robinson Delaney, Robert Campbell. Okay, all right. Moving forward, Kings and Queens. So that's what happened there. I should just give you the end of the story here, in the sense of the fact that what happened is the colonial authorities, because bearing in mind that the British were, you know, already in this area fighting wars with people and trying to annex off land. Yeah. The Berlin Conference would take place 20-something years later, but there's a lot of wars all throughout the 1800s. The 1800s is littered with colonial wars, yeah, where Africans, this is the period of what is called a scramble for Africa, okay? And so there was a lot of manipulation going on. The colonial authorities got involved with the Eba chiefs in order to thwart the program. And what happens also is that the American Civil War begins to kick off, yeah, in America, and so because and a law is passed that allow, and I'm forgetting the name of this law, you know, forgive me, but it allows the American government, yeah, to basically kidnap, quote unquote, freed slaves and reinstitute them back into slavery. And so Martin R. Delaney considers it his duty to stay and fight on behalf of the African people there. The Civil War kicks off, and he fights in the Civil War as well, you know, against the South and these things. Yeah, but all of these things are him trying to defend African people in that respect. And so those two events, the colonial annexing of West Africa and the Civil War in America, kind of thwart this kind of whole program. But Robert Campbell does actually move back to Africa, and he moves back to Lagos. He takes his family and moves to Lagos. Yeah, but the whole entire program doesn't you know, take place. And yes, thank you for that, Terry. Yes, you are correct. there's also warfare between Islamized Africans, yeah, and traditionalists, yeah, because during this time, in fact, it is said that the majority of people that converted to Islam in West Africa actually converted in the 1800s, although Islam was present long before the 1800s. But you know, like somewhere between half and probably more than half of the population in terms of like the numbers of Muslims, yeah, in West Africa kind of came around during this kind of period. Okay, so thanks for that reminder, Brother Terry. All right, one of the founding fathers of Black nationalism, Edward Wilmot Blyden, and I'm taking a bit longer than I should, so I'm going to move a bit faster. All right, just a few points. So he actually moved back to. He's born in the Caribbean, St. Thomas, and he moves. So this is now not America now. This is the Caribbean. Okay, he moves back to Africa, and he lives between Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria between 1885 and 1912. 1912 is actually the year that he died. Yeah, and he is another one of the founding fathers of Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism. Some of his written works, A Voice from Bleeding Africa, African Lives and Customs, which is a book in which he is giving an appraisal of African culture or cultures, comparing it to European culture to the benefits of African culture. So he's comparing European culture, African culture. He's saying African culture is by far the more advanced, when all things are considered. Okay, when all things are considered. And Christianity, Islam, and the Negro race. This is a book in which he gives an appraisal of Christianity and Islam in relationship to Africa and African people. He's a Christian now, and he gives Islam the benefit of the doubt. So he comes to the conclusion that Islam is a more beneficial religion, and I'm going to give you some insight into how he comes to that conclusion shortly. Right, quote from Christianity, Islam, and the Negro race. He says, the African view, once again, note that the African of the universe is based upon the truth that man, nature, and the universe and God are in harmony. There is no alienation. Yeah, the basic morals of human action are cooperation, peace, and building great projects. These are diametrically opposed by the European worldview, which sees man as alienated from God, at war with nature, and surrounded by an indifferent universe. Yeah, so he's given an appraisal once again of African culture. Now, the reason why I say I'm going to give an example, an insight into how he comes to this conclusion, is because this is in the book Christianity, Islam, and the Negro race. And if anybody that understands African spirituality will know that what he's defining there is an African spiritual worldview. It is not an Abrahamic religion worldview. And I'm not at this point seeking to detract from the conclusion that he came to. There are good reasons, from his time. For the next 100 years, there are many Africans who came to the conclusion that Islam was a better religion for Africans because it had an older experience and presence in the on the African continent as far as West Africa is concerned, and had gelled into the culture of the people much more than Christianity had. Or Western Christianity had at that particular moment in time. So there are good reasons for why he comes to that conclusion. I'm only making a point here that what he's describing here is an African spiritualist view. Yeah, because anybody that has heard anybody debate or speak to a Muslim before will tell you that this idea that God is a part of his creation and there's no alienation between it and them kind of things there is taboo. Yeah. For all of the Abrahamic religions. Okay, I'm just making that point. All right. For us, he goes on he says, sorry, in a next thing now, this is a lecture to the Young Men's Literary Association in Sierra Leone, May 19th, 1893, and it was recorded in the Sierra Leone Times, yeah, May 27th. For every one of us, there is a special work to be done, a work of tremendous necessity and tremendous importance, a work for the race to which we belong. It is a great race, great in its vitality, in its powers of endurance, and in its prospect of perpetuity. There is a responsibility which our personality, our membership in this race involves. It is sad to think that there are some Africans, especially among those who have enjoyed the advantages of foreign training, who are blind enough to the radical facts of humanity as to say, let us do away with the sentiment of race. Let us do away with our African personality and be lost, if possible, in another race. This is man speaking in 1893, and just clock how pertinent and relevant them words are for us today. But the term African personality is a term that Edward Wilmot BLYDEN is credited with coining, okay? But at this point, Kings and Queens, we're going from the 1700s to the late 1800s now. This is over 100 years of Africans affirming an African identity for the sake of liberating African people. I want to make that very clear, okay? Right, what of on the continent? Because man, somebody in the audience right now, the viewing audience right now is saying, yeah, all right, Shakara. All these Africans, yeah, from the Caribbean and the Americas and blah, blah, from West Africa. What were the Africans on the continent saying about all of this? James Africanus Horton, author of the African's View of the Negro's Place in Nature, author of A Vindication of the African Race. Note the dates: 1865, 1868. Yeah, James Africanus Horton is born in what is now known as Nigeria. He spent some time living in another nation, I believe it's Sierra Leone, yeah, in West Africa. And he was not born with the name Africanus. He actually adopts the name Africanus. So if you Google him, you will probably just see Africanus Horton, yeah? But he is credited with being the father of Pan-African thought, yeah, intellectual thought in West Africa, okay, because he was writing these documents during this time. So he condemns racism. He condemns racism much. So he even writes about, in A Vindication of the African Race, he writes about racism in the Americas. He's advocating for independence and self-government and African nationhood, yeah, on the African continent. And in fact, I believe he's one of the earliest to have considered affirming the concept of African nationality. Yeah, that is a term that he used. Okay, just presenting some other names who were present at this time. Most of these are in West Africa. J.E. Casey Hayford, Adelaide Casey Hayford, Ghana and Sierra Leone respectively. Yeah, but they are forerunners, 1800 philosophers in Pan-Africanism. John Mensah Saba, Mojola Agbebi, don't worry, I'm going to come back to him, and Deuce Muhammad Ali. Deuce Muhammad Ali is from Sudan and Egypt, okay? Not going to go into all these names because we're just throwing it out there because I do want to open up the conversation shortly. Ethiopianism is another concept that through which people were affirming an African identity. Now, this is predominantly East and Southeast Africa, yeah? In Lesotho, in 1872, 150 Africans renounced French missionaries, giving birth to the Ethiopian African Church movement, yeah, in Southern Africa. Reverend Mangena Maka Mokone broke away from the Methodist Church and formed the Ethiopian Church of South Africa in 1892. Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, yeah, who's one of the leading members of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, visits South Africa in 1898. The point that's being made here is that, okay, so first of all, Psalm 60, I believe it is, Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God, and princes shall come out of Egypt, yeah, becomes a psalm of inspiration for an entire movement, yeah, to revolve around the concept of Ethiopianism. Ethiopia coming to be known as a name, a synonym for the continent of Africa. Understanding that the nation we now call Ethiopia is then known as Abyssinia. Okay, so Ethiopianism is an African liberation movement. All right, being pushed through the church. Okay, And this quote from a book by the name of Pan-Africanism, a History by Professor Hakeem Addy says, Ethiopianism in South Africa, as well as elsewhere, was also clearly a manifestation of wider social and political unrest and was associated with the slogan, Africa for the Africans. I forgot to mention earlier that Martin DELANY is the individual credited with coining the phrase, Africa for the Africans. It was also used by Edward Wilmot BLYDEN and was popularized by the prophet Marcus Mosiah Garvey, with the addition, those at home and those abroad. But the phrase, even before Garvey now, the phrase Africa for the Africans is associated with the Ethiopian church movement in Southern Africa. Ethiopianism in South Africa was strengthened by the outbreak of the Second Boer War and subsequently considered a contributory factor to the 1906 Zulu Bambata Rebellion in Natal. This rebellion also led to one of the earliest Pan-Africanist texts, hear it now, A Defense of the Ethiopian Movement, written by Bandele Omoni, 1884 to 1913, a young Nigerian student based in Britain who ended his short life engaged in politics in Brazil. Nigerian student writing a defense of the Ethiopian church movement in Southern Africa, and ends his life politically engaged in Brazil, which is the most populous nation in the Western Hemisphere as far as African people is concerned. Okay, all right. Majola Agbebi. Forgive my spelling mistake there. Jeez. All right. Founded the Native Baptist Church in 1888 and the African Baptist Union of West Africa. Born David Brown Vincent, he reclaimed his African name. So he threw away a European name. He was born with the name David Brown Vincent. And this African, who was born in what would later become known as Nigeria, dash with a European name. Dash it where. Fling it where. And reclaimed the name Mojola Agbebi. Yes? Agbebi promoted the development of a church governed by Africans. This is his own words now. Worked by Africans, supported by Africans, minus the tremors, complexion, and domination of a foreign and alien race. He's a churchman. Last year, the first. Inaugural, this is a speech that he delivered at the inaugural event of the United Native African Church in May 1882. Y'all ain't hear what I'm saying. You never heard what I just said. But Brother Majola was also famous for making statements like the European church is dangerous, as far as Africans are concerned. We're nearly there, Kings and Queens. We're nearly there. So I've skipped a whole lot. I've just jumped through a whole heap of history to get to Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Just noting the name, the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League of the world. The term African is used again. We're gonna jump again. We're gonna make another jump. And just deal with how Africanness is affirmed in the independence era. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. That's the Sajid Kwame Nkrumah. There is a new African in the world. This is a speech that he made during the inauguration of the independence of Ghana. Patrice Lumumba said similar words. We are going to show the world that what the black man can do when he works in freedom. And we are going to make of the Congo the center of the sun's radius for all of Africa. So all these people are coming with not just a regional kind of nation state consciousness. They're coming with a Pan-African, all African consciousness. Finally, we're going to end with the great Omowale Malcolm X and the program of the Organization of Afro-American Unity and how they were addressing issues of identity and the African liberation fight. Establishment. Having stated our determination, now bear in mind, this constitution, or well, not quite constitution, it was the program and also known as the aims and objective of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. Yeah. A lot of history that's there that I won't go into, except to say that this was modeled after the Organization of African Unity on the continent, because he was seeking to join the liberation fight on the continent and unify Africans throughout the Americas now, not just in the United States of America, but throughout the Americas, yeah, to fight for our liberation and join our brothers and sisters in that liberation fight. Okay. Leading members of the Organization Afro-American Unity are Omowale Malcolm X, importantly his sister Ella Collins. Yeah, not enough of us know about Ella Collins, but she is the big sister of Omowale Malcolm X, his biggest supporter, and one of the leading members. In fact, when he was assassinated, she actually took over the leadership of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. The person, however, responsible for actually penning the aims and objective is the great and illustrious historian Baba John Henrik Clark. So these words were written by Baba John Henrik Clark as a result of the consultations and the decisions that were made by the leadership of the OAAU. Establishment. Having stated our determination, confidence and resolve, the Organization of Afro-American Unity is hereby established on the 15th day of February 1965 in the city of New York. Upon its establishment, the Afro-American people will launch a cultural revolution which will provide the means for restoring our identity, that we might rejoin our brothers and sisters on the African continent culturally, psychologically, economically, and share with them the sweet fruits of freedom from oppression and independence of racist governments. In order, under the point of restoration, yeah, in order to enslave the African, it was necessary for our enslavers to completely sever our communication with the African continent and the Africans that remained there. In order to free ourselves from the oppression of our enslavers, then, it is absolutely necessary for the Afro-American to restore communications with Africa. We must begin to re-educate ourselves and become alert listeners in order to learn as much as we can about the progress of our motherland, Africa. We must correct in our minds the distorted image that our enslaver has portrayed to us of Africa, that he might discourage us from establishing communications with her and thus obtain freedom from oppression. Under the point of reorientation, Malcolm X, you know, and the way how I love this man, yeah, and the way how I love what he was doing, what he was leaving us, yeah, before he was assassinated. And this makes you, it always leaves me in the state of wonder as to what would have happened had he lived, or had the organization had a stronger foundation at the point at which he was assassinated. But that's another subject for another time. In order to keep the Afro-American enslaved, it was necessary to limit our thinking to the shores of America, to prevent us from identifying our problems with the problems of other people of African origin. This made us consider ourselves an isolated minority without allies anywhere. Yeah, I'm not breaking all this down, you know, Kings and Queens. I'm hoping that you're actually listening and identifying the points of relevance as to how this relates to today. Yeah, the conversations that we're having today, the debates that are going on today, the attacks against Pan-Africanism and African identity that are taking place today. Okay, and when I open up the lines, you can share your perceptions. The Organization of Afro-American Unity will develop in the Afro-American people a keen awareness of our relationship with the world at large, and clarify our roles, rights, and responsibilities as human beings. We can accomplish this goal by becoming well-informed concerning world affairs and understanding that our struggle is part of a larger world struggle of oppressed peoples against all forms of oppression. We must change the thinking of the Afro-American by liberating our minds through the study of philosophies and psychologies, cultures and languages that did not come from our racist oppressors. Under national concerns, general terminologies, he goes into they go into an explanation of breaking down the term Negro and why it's deficient. And so at the end of this, they affirm the identities that they are affirming, yeah, as Africans in America and throughout the Americas. He says, we accept the use of the term Afro-American, African, and Black man in reference to persons of African heritage. To every other part of mankind goes this measure of just respect. We do not desire more, nor shall we accept less. This is the African self-defining. Nobody now gonna tell we, oh, we for define. Yeah. And I should also clarify that the term Afro-American, in one of his last interviews in 1965, he's interviewed by a group of Congolese students, yeah, and he gives, and I played this actually at the beginning of the video today, the session today. For those who missed it, he's explaining that the fact that the term Afro-American, and he does also use the term African-American, does not just relate to Africans in the United States of America. He's referring to Africans throughout the Americas. Yeah, so all the continent of North America, yeah, which is Canada, United States, Mexico, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. But he also goes on to explain that he's also referring to Africans in Europe, because many of the Africans in Europe by this time are migrating from the Americas. Yeah, so he actually forms a branch of the Organization of Afro-American Unity in France, for example, and attempts to do so in the UK when he travels here also. Okay, all right. Big up my brother from Belize in the house. You don't know. One of the strongholds of the Garvey movement, Belize. I mean, right. Couple more slides. Worldwide concern. The time is past due. You know, I'm gonna skip this slide for the sake of time. Yeah. No, in fact, let me just read the last part. Our relatives who are in the majority or in their own country have found it very difficult to gain independence from a minority. It is that much more difficult for Afro-Americans who are a minority away from the motherland and still oppressed by those who encourage the crushing of our African identity. So for the Africans, the Black nationalist Africans who are organizing this, they are seeing the affirmation of an African identity as one of the tools, one of the fundamental tools. They're reinforcing what Martin DELANY was saying almost a century prior about affirming original identity. Yes, as a tool for waging a liberation fight. And because they're seeing it as the American government establishment deliberately tries to crush the affirmation of an African identity. So they're affirming one in relation to liberation. Last slide. This is not in the program now. This is a quote taken from that interview that I was referring to earlier. He's explaining the impact that the independence movement on the African continent is having on Africans throughout the world, and the impact of a positive image of Africa and what that does in terms of inspiring Africans to organize among each other. He says, as that race pride develops, it has a tendency to make us want to unite together and work together. And your Western imperialists and colonialists consider this to be a great threat. More a threat than communism or Marxism or socialism or anything else. Africanism is what they consider to be the real threat. So basically, Kings and Queens, what I've done, yeah, for longer than I expected to, is just given over 100 years, yeah, of the affirmation of an African identity as self-defined by African people as an act of liberation, political, economic, cultural, and spiritual ascendancy, yeah, as opposed to this self-aggrandizement, feel-good factor, and utopian, unrealistic dreaming. I hope I have made the case very, very clear. I hope I have made the case unequivocally. And I do hope that ones and ones will be inspired to join me in the conversation right about now. And feel free to share your thoughts, your feelings, your reflections on what it is I have shared. All right. Okay. So I know some of you would not have got all of that. Feel free, yeah, to, you know what I mean, you know, watch back the video when the video for watch back when it done, you know what I'm saying. But right now, I'm gonna share the link in the chat. I haven't even gone into the extent to which Africans on the continent, I'm gonna show you a couple books on the continent, were actually organizing and reconstituting nations during the enslavement period, because obviously nations were broken up, disturbed, and all kind of different things. Yeah. But what is also a fact, yeah, is that people from different African nations, in terms of resisting the enslavement process, were actually reconstituting and organizing. So just like we have quote unquote maroons in the Americas, we have maroons on the African continent as well. And these are made up of different groups of people. Yeah. And so the Pan-African kind of concept and ethos exists on the African continent even before, yeah, it manifests itself in the Americas, yeah, in that respect. Okay. Right, sharing the link now. Yeah, feel free to just come in it. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be it's an open random conversation. Feel free to come in and just let me know what you think of the thing. Shout out to Desi Joe 10. You get me? You don't know. Yeah, but in fact, you know what? I'm gonna actually do that, yeah. I know why this person is saying this, because I haven't mentioned the ADOS since the beginning of the video. You know what I mean? But you know, heads are back, they're taking it. You know what I'm saying? I have noted though, I heard today that parts of the Black agenda have been revised. Well, I say revised, they haven't formally revised it, but at one point they were championing HR 40, now they're not, which is interesting. But let me share the ADOS website just to keep this individual happy for whatever agenda he's trying to serve or she is trying to serve right about now. But the link to join the conversation is in the chat, family. Feel free to come true. You know what I'm saying? Agree with me, disagree with me, tell me I'm chatting strippiness, tell me that African identity is nonsense, that I'm inaccurate, or feel free to add, yeah, to anything that I've missed out. I don't claim to have been the most comprehensive. As I said, I was making big jumps, yeah. But for those who were not here at the beginning, I started in the mid to late 1700s, during which I was saying that a number of self-identified African organizations sprung up throughout the Americas, yeah. And so at the first point that we see Africans self-defining, yeah, during the enslavement period, they define, our ancestors defined themselves as African. And so that thread has continued from then till now. I was also identifying the context in which that African identification came about, what the people who formed these organizations were trying to do, the problems they were trying to solve in terms of advocating and fighting on our behalf. All right. And so that's the purpose of this thing. So when I see movements coming up now that are not just only rejecting of African identity, but are hostile towards African identity and seeking to justify, you know, creating a division between various so-called tribes of Africans based upon who was dropped off where during the so-called transatlantic so-called slave trade. And they're not giving a proper appraisal. I wouldn't mind so much if these people, these groups, were not misrepresenting the Pan-African ethos, the African-centered ethos, the African nationhood ethos so much. Like I'm one of the people that I believe in being honest in disagreement. If I disagree with a brother or a sister or an ideology, I'm going to agree or disagree. So I'm going to disagree with the ideology based upon the truth of what I understand the ideology to be saying, not misrepresent it with strawman argument and then pretend that I'm debating or presenting an alternative. Because in order to present an alternative, I would have to be doing justice to that which I am challenging. Yeah. And so we're born red herring around here. Born red herring around here. And we burn misrepresentation and mischaracterization. Fire for that. Lightning and earthquake for that. Yeah. And so essentially, the purpose of this live conversation is to set the record straight in terms of what African identity is, what it represents, yeah, and what it is designed to accomplish. All right. So yeah, feel free to join the conversation, kings and queens. I saw Terry jump in a second ago, and he jumped out again. I don't know why I go on for that. I hope your internet good, you know what I mean, Terry. You know, you forget the back to Brother DELANY. You know what I'm saying, Brother DELANY, one of the key reparations activists on these shores, kings and queens. Yeah, one of the key reparations activists on these shores, Brother DELANY. If you don't know, get to know. You know what I'm saying. I don't even know if he's got a if you've got a channel, Brother DELANY, like, do you post up videos on them thing there? You know what I mean? Check out his thing anyway. You know, even if he just got like videos, I'm sure it will be most beneficial and edifying. I haven't even posted the ADOS website yet. All right, there you go. Yeah, Desi Joe 10. See the ADOS website there, so. You know what I mean? You know, I'm being a good sport. Yes, family, tune into Constructive Convos this Monday. We're going to be discussing Black economics at 9:30 this Monday coming, 9:30 p.m., which is the GMT time, and then 5:30 EST. So yeah, come true. You know what I'm saying? We're in the middle of discussing our nation building strategies. Last week we were discussing, Monday gone we were discussing parenting. The week before that we were discussing polygamy. You know what I mean? Polygamy. Check out, post the link, Brother DELANY. Post the link to the Reparations March YouTube channel. Yeah, the Reparations March YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm gonna be hosting some conversations here, soon, on reparations. Yeah, so stay tuned for that. Reparations literacy. Okay, reparations literacy, so that we understand reparations, the issue of reparations, the legalese, and the social movement, more importantly, because there's a social global movement for reparations, you know, that exists. Yeah, don't let nobody fool you. There are Africans who are globally organizing on the issue of reparations. All right, family. So that's why, you know what I mean, you for know that. I'm seeing Shakina. Shakina, Sister Shakina's up in the house. Blessings, Sister Shakina. You don't know. Welcome. Big up to my brother from across the waters, Afrimac TV. I'm gonna say it, family. Yeah, that if you're not familiar with Afrimac TV, yeah, just scroll up in the chat right about now and go and subscribe to that channel. Yeah, go and subscribe to that channel right there, Afrimac TV. The brother is very serious, and you know, Arden Gavia after my own heart, kings and queens. So, you know what I mean? We give thanks for them energies there. You know, I love it when I back up with people, you know, that I didn't know about that were doing this work, and they're doing this work. You know what I mean? You know, in concert with some of the more obscure elements, yeah, that sometimes you can feel you're alone in championing. All right, and just like that, 2 people jumping in the chat. But yeah, I'm saying, kings and queens, you know what I mean? Please, yeah, sign up and subscribe to Afrimac TV. The brother is doing some very, very informative work, and his videos are a lot shorter than mine. You know, may have them long 2-hour video. You know, my man, 15 minutes, 5 minutes straight, no long thing. But what he's able to pack into that space of time is phenomenal. So yeah, it's all good, Sister Shakina. Don't worry about that. Better late than never. You know what I mean? So I say it, go right, Brother Terry, Brother E. You know what I mean? It's free conversation, you know. So let's talk, innit? What you say?
No, it was quite interesting that what you was talking about, and that's what I kind of try to show people of certain times where, you know, Africa was a word that was freely spoken, but at the same time, when we have these anti-Africans that we see today, it was happening back then as well. In that factor of, there were some people, like when they were planning to go to Sierra Leone, like the Free African Society, there was a group of people that were anti-African and anti going back to Africa. They wanted to reside where they were trying to say they were the indigenous back then.
Yes.
Yeah, so yeah, it was quite interesting that you broke that down, and you know, as I said, it's kind of realizing even after slavery or even before slavery, there were organized people at that time. You know.
Yeah, fam. You know what I mean? And that's the thing for me, like in the sense of people act like this Africa thing. They act like it popped up in the 60s.
Yeah.
Just what I'm saying, like, and it's just not the case. You know what I mean? And the people them had good grounds for it. And what I also want to get across is that many of the people that formulated this African identity thing were Africans that were born on the continent. Yeah, because honestly, we have to appreciate that the enslavement period didn't end until the mid to late 1800s. Yeah? So Africans were being brought from the continent all throughout that period. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, and so for example, and I didn't even touch on things like Haiti, for example, yeah, whereby it is estimated that over half the people that fought in the Haiti Revolution were born on the continent.
Yeah,
you know.
And then don't forget the Creoles that went to Sierra Leone and Liberia.
Liberia, yeah, you know what I'm saying, and even those examples are slightly problematic in the sense of more Liberia than Sierra Leone in the sense of what the people them did, yeah, when they got to Liberia. You know what I'm saying? In terms of some of the things that went on there, yeah. You know what I'm saying? But the point is that whether that example or not is the best of examples, the spirit of Africanness was present among the people them, and so that move was made in that spirit, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? And then we can make our critiques otherwise. What I didn't mention, however, is that Martin Delaney, yeah, in one of the papers that I mentioned, the essays that he wrote that I mentioned, actually condemns Liberia. Yeah. This is in writing in the 1800s, and he says that Liberia, because Liberia is considered has some semblance of independence, and he said basically Liberia is not an independent state. Yeah, it's basically a satellite of America. Yeah, they're not independent. They have to answer to the American government, and no independent nation answers to another nation for decisions that it wants to make for itself. Yeah, so among the African nationalists at that time, they also condemned Liberia and some of the things that were going on in Liberia as well.
Yeah, but you've got to kind of realize the mindset of the people that went from, let's say, for instance, America to places like Liberia with the American ideology of that time. Definitely. And when you're pushing your American narrative to these people, which have their own traditions, it creates a hostile place. But then we got to even recognize at that time, the Europeans at that time put kind of trade sanctions, which made it even more difficult for the ones that actually went over there. Exactly.
And let's bear in mind also that the activities of Africans in Liberia at the time, the American government had full control over. Yeah. So even the type of Africans who got into power in Liberia, that was the domain and the responsibility and the program of the American government, which is what Martin Delaney was identifying, which Eli Garcia, yeah, a member of the UNIA, ACL, Marcus Garvey's organization, who was sent to Liberia, the first delegation to Liberia. When he wrote his report, he made reference to these things about how the quote-unquote Americo-Liberians were behaving in relation to the quote-unquote indigenes or the indigenous people. Yeah, so all throughout Black nationalist political development, this critique has existed. Yeah, even as people tried to move back and return home to Africa. So,
and that's why when I talk about Richard Allen and what's it called, the grandfathers. These guys kind of paved the way for the Marcus Garvey era, because they actually did achieve but didn't complete of going back to Africa.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to read this this comment from Student of Life. It says, "What African oral tradition?" Let me get this up big. I can read it good. You know what I mean? All African oral traditions, spirituality, way of life survive for the continued onslaught of organized Abrahamic attacks, or is it necessary for an African-centered holy book to preserve a sense of identity, along with organizations, temples under the guidance of such a book? Good question, and it's one that I've been it's a conversation I've had with a number of African spiritualists. The answer to the question is, as far as I'm concerned, only if the tradition naturally evolves, yeah, a sacred text. We do not need to be creating sacred texts in order to compete with Abrahamic religions. And I say that partly because, for example, in Ifa, yeah, you have the Odu Ifa, but it is intended to be memorized, yeah. That is part of what, but now you can find it in written form, yeah. But for most of its existence, it was preserved in its oral form. You know what I'm saying? And there are systems within the Ifa tradition that preserve, yeah, the telling and the recitation, and the divinations associated with the Odu Ifa, yeah. Yes, I have. I don't even know who Raw Beats Trill is. I have, you know, cut the natty. I'm starting again, Kings and Queens. I'm gonna do a video on this now because people keep asking. So I'm gonna do a video on my hair journey and why I'm starting again. I'm basically starting again. Yeah, and it has to do with me being a father, and these things. All right. Okay. But yeah, so yeah, there's that too. So I'm saying that only if the tradition naturally evolves into, but we do have to find ways of protecting African spirituality from the onslaught of Abrahamic religions, most certainly. Yeah. And I would say sacred texts or written records, and I wouldn't even just say sacred texts, you know, because sometimes there are implications that come with sacred texts, but we definitely have to document more in terms of the evolution and knowledge of the tradition, yeah, in written form. I would agree with that.
Yeah, because majority of them put it in contents of songs and stories.
These kinds of things, you know what I'm saying?
And these are oral songs, and this is where we sometimes have to be careful of putting it into a book to making it compete with the Abrahamic, because it's a story that you have to become that entity.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't really get to understand where they feel that they have to pray or worship something.
Yes.
Which the oral systems don't do.
Yes, family. You know what I mean? E Black, feel free to jump in. You know. So I know man is chatting, so I don't want you to feel like you can't talk. It's free flying convo, right?
Man, I'm just here with my brethren. You get me? We're just taking it in right now.
Cool. Ain't at the brethren. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? But yeah. So yeah. I'll say that I do want to share this book with the family though. 1 second. Let me just share the link one more time. Yeah, let me just share the link one more time so that heads can comment at this, you know what I mean? Feel free to comment at this, you know. Shout out to everyone just joining the conversation. You can feel free to like up the video, share the link and them kind of things there, all right? But yeah, this book, entitled Fighting the Slave Trade, yeah, the West African Strategies, by Sylviane A. Diouf, yeah. It's probably the only book, yeah, that documents in detail the resistance, yeah, to the enslavement of African people that took place on the continent of Africa itself. Yeah, and I'm sharing it because one of the most insidious and deceptive narratives that has come out of many of these anti-African propaganda machines, yeah, be they coming from our community or Babylon, yeah, Western media, education system, and so on and so forth, is the idea that the enslavement process is principally a collaboration, yeah, of equal partners between African kings and chiefs and priests, and European governments, missionaries, and so-called slave traders. And this book refutes that claim, puts things into proper context. And if you've got time a little bit later, I'll probably read an excerpt from it. Yeah. And the good thing about it is that it's comprehensive, so that it doesn't just deal with how Africans militarily fought back. A lot of us have put the emphasis on, you know, militarily fighting back. Like, we want to hear about man and woman I pick up arms and gun and a bust gun and chop off white boy head and something there. And these things are important. Yeah, these things are important. But understanding that we're dealing with communities, we're dealing with nations, we're dealing with civilization, societies, that the people had to adopt many different means, yeah, to survive the onslaught of European enslavers. And the book is honest, because in some of the methods that some African groups adopted, disadvantaged other African groups, yeah. But we have to understand that in the context of the time and the circumstance that it took place in. All right, but I say it again, yeah, this is an essential reading for people that are saying that Africans sold us into slavery, so therefore we have no connection. I implore you, please, yeah, pick up the book and put, you know, your understanding of history into context. Yeah, all right. We have somebody else joining the chat. Supreme Abel, Aman.
Righteousness, there, bro.
Righteousness.
Selassie I the first as well, you know.
Ali I the first. Rastafari.
Yeah, Shakra, the one thing that people don't talk about, even in the times of the Portuguese supplying weapons, when the traditionalists were actually fighting against the Islamic faiths.
Yeah.
Because when the Fulanis were infiltrating into many traditional people, because even before the houses were Muslims, they had their own traditions.
Yeah.
But then when the Fulanis came with Islam, they infiltrated into their core values. Like in Nigeria, there was a place where they called Sokoto.
Yes.
And the kingdom there was infiltrated by the Fulanis.
Yes.
And once the Fulanis got in, they now their mission was to push down, where Christianity was pushing from the bottom and Islam was pushing from the top.
Yeah.
And the traditional people were in the middle. They were sandwiched. But at the same time, when the Portuguese were supplying weapons, there was a war between the Yorubas and the Hausas, infiltrated behind the scenes with the Fulanis. And this is where there's a part where they called Ilori, where they converted quite a lot of the Yorubas into being Muslims. But a lot of people died at that time of that time of war. And we don't get. There is a lot of books that state this and talk about this within the publication of the Nigerian publication, which has been like dismissed, or the author is not alive anymore. So they've been discontinued.
Now, yeah, just as a historical point, one of the most well-known figures from the period that you're talking about is Usman Dan Fodio.
Yeah.
He's one of the people that was responsible for the founding of the Sokoto Caliphate.
Yeah.
And these kinds of things. So yeah, important.
I would like to ask the brother, they were just speaking on Islam. What form of Islam was that, you know? Because for me, you know, a lot of them conquering antics from Islam is when after the Islam got infiltrated by the Abbasids, the Pale Arab, they infiltrated the teachings. You see what I'm saying? See what I'm saying, brother?
Yeah.
Original black. You agree with that, then, brother? Yeah. This is the original black. I'm a Sufi Muslim. Yeah. And you agree that the Sufi part of it, the mystical, right? We still deal with the old ancient teachings of Africa. That's the original teachings of Islam, brother. Because even Muhammad said he was with two Sufi Muslim black men. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but this is if you look at it in the forms of the records, you will understand the contract between the times of the, what we call the Virginia Coming, the Queen Elizabeth period, when Queen Elizabeth able to negotiate with the Moroccans, which they created what we call the Burberry Company, Barbary, and that company was a cover up in the for saying that they had a form of a treaty amongst the two of them, which, when you look at the treaty and you see the documents, you realize that the exchange was that the English were able to maneuver within Africa and a lot of Arab countries without being kidnapped or being put into forms of slavery. But what they got from the Moroccans was that they were able to give them arms that were made in Birmingham and Wolverhampton and that vicinity, which they used the arms because at that period, Morocco was jealous of the Songhai Empire, but couldn't infiltrate it at the time because of their military force.
And so, also, those brothers were Sufis, the ones in Africa.
So I wouldn't. What I'm trying to say is, I wouldn't go from what side they are, but I will go from the people, because I tend not to use the religion's sake of it. In that, whether they were Sufis or not, the point is that these set of Moroccans were looking to infiltrate into Mali. And these are where things started to begin to change.
Yeah, and I think I think you're right. I think the essential point is less the sect, let's say, of Islam, but more the political allegiance.
Mm-hmm.
And how that related to, so if you got a nation that considered that there are instances, I'm not saying that this was universal, because there were many Muslims in West Africa who fought against slavery. There's no doubt about that. But there are also instances of the idea that people that are Muslim are basically free from enslavement, if that makes sense. Like, people were not enslaved or put into slavery in West Africa. People that are Muslims or considered part of the Ummah. You know what I'm saying? So it was these are political decisions that don't necessarily respect a sect or a particular kind of Islam.
No doubt. And I would say that, the reason why they had beef with the darker Muslims, the ones from the Sufi Muslims, the ones in Morocco, that is because they didn't like how we mixed up our tradition, the Islam, with our indigenous culture, our culture values, and we didn't make religion a business. You see what I'm saying?
But and if you look at it in this perspective, and this is what I always say, is that how the European infiltrated that side of Islam is because they used the same Moroccans to beat in the Spanish. Because remember when they went into war against the Spanish on the waters?
Yeah.
And they needed alliances to able to beat in the Spanish to accomplish what they needed, because they were trained by the Portuguese. And if you look in the documents, you will see in the documents it mentions the exchange of guns and for Morocco to able to look for sugar. But the thing is, Moroccans weren't able to have sugar because they don't have the land ground to have sugar. So where will they go?
Yeah, I want to add here. Big up to my brother Omowale Africa in the house. He's tuned in but driving. He's given us a book recommendation, and the book is Tropical Dependency, an outline of the ancient history of the Western Sudan. Western Sudan is basically West Africa. Yeah, that's what you please. West Africa, or Black Africa. So Sudan was their name for Black Africa, basically. So West Africa was Western Sudan, with an account of the modern settlement of northern Nigeria. This is written by a colonizer by the name of Flora L. Shaw, also known by the name Lady Lugard. Yeah, between she and her husband are the people that actually came up with the name Nigeria, Niger area apparently.
Yeah, and that's where you will find today. You will find a lot of the houses that go from Nigeria to Sudan.
Right. Because I would say my teaching brand of Islam, Brother Shakara, is the same brand of Islam that fought against Alexandria. Come in that same ilk, my brother, the Umayyads. You understand?
Yeah.
And then it's when the Abbasids came in. They came in. That's when the Pale Arabs started to come in, and that's when they came in with the Shias, and that's when the Sunnis and come on after that. Because
did you say Shias or Shia?
Shia, the Shias. They came after that because they were hating on the original Sufi Moors, because we weren't forcing people when we was running Europe. We weren't forcing people under under Islam. We thought, well, it's better that if we practice, you see how righteous we are, then you're gonna come over to our thing. You see what I'm saying? To our teachings. But there was a lot of pressure from the Arabian, the Middle East, which was mainly black at them times there. But it was a lot of pressure from those sects. The Shias saying that they're the original from Muhammad. You see what I'm saying? They're the original fact they should get the lineage. You understand? The Pale Arabs, that's when they came. And I believe that they were helped by the Jews, the Ashkenazi Jew. That the Moors were, we had a lot of more Jews around us, the Muslims that first came into Spain.
You got to realize with that one is that if you look at the time of Spain, you'll realize that there was a period of time when Isabella expelled a whole heap of Jews as well as Moorish people, and there was a set of more Jews that left Spain and was on the outskirts of the Moroccans' vicinity.
Yes, Gibraltar and those islands there.
Yeah.
And but a lot of the Jews, they did get kicked out because they were doing a lot of child sacrificing. They didn't like the fact that they're usury systems. The same thing that they're doing today. That's why Queen Isabella kicked them out.
All right, man's hearing the thing, yeah. I don't really want to turn this into a religious discussion, though. Not to say
that's not no religion. We're talking about the politics, brother.
Yeah. I hear you. I'm just making sure.
I'm just making you brothers know what I'm representing. When I'm fine. I'm dealing with Islam,
Feel free to represent your thing. But I did want to say though that we can find examples on all sides of this thing. So for example, I mentioned Usman Dan Fodio, who I think was on the wrong side of the thing. But then there's also Sheikh Amadou Bamba, who I think was on the right side of the thing. You know what I'm saying? Who was
that's what I said. Now I would tell a man would say I'm crazy, but that's what. Because when I went to Senegal, I had I did Hajj in Africa twice. I went to South Africa, and then after that I went to Senegal, and that's when I got a revelation, brothers. And I realized that Sufi Islam is what I should be dealing with. I really love the teachings of the great Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
So that's why when the Muslims are, and for me, Elijah Muhammad taught that there's a prophet in everyone's race should have their own prophet.
Yes, sir.
So I give praises, peace be upon him, to Sheikh Amadou Bamba. I would say to Muslims, and some Muslims, they're upset when I say this. I say that Muhammad ain't the black man's prophet because he didn't go to Africa to try and free up the people. He was for the Arabs in that region.
Boy,
man. That's what I teach, bro.
Shout out to my Muslim brothers and sisters who are biting their tongues and their fingernails and their lips right about now. You get me? Everything going, everything mash up. That's it, go. But yeah, all right, Kings.
But getting back to
one sec, cause somebody just joined the chat. Let me just check. Go on.
Uncle Raz.
What? Raz changed his profile picture.
Yeah.
Come on, the Raz. Where you say?
Salam alaikum.
How you mean?
What's going on, bros? It's good.
Everything blessed. What are you saying?
I'm blessed, man. I'm blessed. I'm happy to see you guys. I'm happy to be blessed, and I'm happy that you guys have been blessed also.
Yes,
long
sir.
life to you, man.
Have you heard the conversation, or you just tuning in?
No, I'm literally just tuning in now, man.
All right. So yes, but for yourself and anybody else that's just tuning in, basically what I did at the beginning was go through over 100 years of Africans identifying with an African identity, and identify with an African identity with a Black nationalist, African nationalist, or Pan-Africanist mission in mind and action. Yeah. And basically, I'm just challenging a lot of the anti-African identity propaganda that is out there right about now. Not necessarily to challenge their perspectives in particular, but to defend the African identity, Pan-Africanist perspective. You know, to put that forward and set the record straight, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I began in the mid to late 1700s, beginning with people like Ignatius Sancho and Phyllis Wheatley, went through to Olaudah Equiano and Otaba Kogwano, went through to people like Martin Delaney, yeah, and Edward Wilmot Blyden, went through to people like Mojola Agbebi in Nigeria in the 1800s, you know what I'm saying? And so just coming through the Ethiopianist movement in South Africa and the Caribbean during and the Americas in general throughout that period. You know what I mean? Prince Hall Masonry, you know what I'm saying? Them kind of things there. And just affirming the importance of what it was that people were trying to achieve when they adopted the African identity. Now, I want to make this point clear here, that there was an African identity affirmed by Africans before there was a Nigerian identity affirmed by Africans, because there was no Nigeria during this
100.
Right? There was no Gold Coast, there was no Ghana.
I call it. I really call it the Dubois Renaissance. We're living in the Dubois Renaissance. The philosophies of Dubois are creeping back up into the mainstream, man.
Explain that, bro.
Like the air, the aura in the air right now is reminiscent of the relationship between the Garvey movement and Garvey himself and Dubois. And I think that the Pan-Africanist identity right now is going through similar things that they went through in the 30s. And I think there is a rehashing of these philosophies that are quite detrimental to the whole collective. The Dubois Renaissance. You know what I mean? So.
No, yeah, I'm gonna agree with you for the most part. I'm gonna be honest with you. I wouldn't even mind if the people there would just be honest or informed. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? All these people are talking and they it's clear they don't know the first thing about Pan-Africanism, because you don't make statements like what they're making if you know something about what you're talking about. You know what I'm saying? You don't say, for example, that Africans in Africa don't want you over there, otherwise they give you citizenship. Yeah, if you understand, just say I'm saying, like, you know what I mean, something about Pan-Africanism. You don't do that,
brother. You know what I think it is, my brother. It's understanding who's running what.
This is the part I mean.
Brothers don't understand is that the devil runs Africa.
Yeah,
you understand, and because of that, he don't understand that these guys are taking orders from Europeans.
That's it.
So that they can get easy access to the resources of Africa. That's why they put a leader on the seat. Give him some billions, and he lets them in easy. Don't say a word.
Don't say a word. You get me?
That's what these people forgetting. Who's that Africa's not in control. Black people don't control Africa.
Yeah. In fact, you know what? On that point, let me share another brilliant piece of book with the people in. Yeah. I didn't put this in the presentation because I just wanted to save time. But this is another excellent piece of book, yeah, you know what I'm saying? And it named Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state by Sheikh Anta Diop, yeah? And so he, in this book, yeah, gives an appraisal of the conditions that go into creating what we see on the African continent today, yeah? He wrote this in the 1950s, yeah? And a strategy, a template, a plan for overcoming those things. Yeah, notice the title of the book. Yeah, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state. Yeah, that means a unified state. All right, in other a synonym for federated. Okay, and so if I had more time, I'd have gone into this in the presentation itself. Yeah, but there's no doubt that among the Pan-African movement, there are methodologies that the fight is to overcome and overthrow these puppet regimes that we see on the continent today. And these people, some of them know better, you know, but they're choosing not to put it forward, innit? And so again, before we can even debate properly, we have to set the record straight. We can't even engage in a conversation because you're misrepresenting the team, yeah? Right. And you need to be corrected, yeah, on your misrepresentation before we can even have a conversation about the truth or falsehood or viability of your program right about now and what it is that you're putting forward. You know what I'm saying? You know, should I say, if we're going to do it on equal terms, because man can mash up the thing still, you know what I'm saying? But it's just more about, you know, if we're going to engage in an honest, fair conversation, you know?
I feel that Negroes be playing games because they be acting like Africa's like the devil ain't got their hands all over Africa.
Yeah, fam.
And that's why we can't speak, because now all of a sudden Africa are independent and they making these stupid decisions on their own. Come on, man. And now the devil using the China man, he gonna turn them into the new industrial nation. Because the Chinese people, they don't want that crap. They don't want that communism and living like for less than nothing, and everyone else in the world are living off those produce and they're getting like 50p a day, 50p an hour or something, 10p an hour, some madness like that. Now they're gonna send it over to Africa, all those things. That's why the Chinese are there, because they're gonna send all that crap, all that pollution over to Africa. Africa's gonna get ripped apart when that China man's done putting his factories and stuff over there.
Yeah, family.
Yeah, I'm 100% against that, man, because like the continent is so rich, and we like there's what is like 75% of Africa is undiscovered and unexplored. And if these men come in and build their factories, we're just gonna have smog cities like they have in China, polluted rivers.
Bro.
It's gonna be
worse than China,
man.
Because they're gonna be pulling it out the same. They're gonna be pulling the resources out of the same country that they're gonna be polluting. That place.
Yeah, 100.
Go on, brother.
100. And I also think there's ways of developing that doesn't that everyone can benefit from. You get me? Like my thing is, I feel like the issue that we're having is the issue of greed in this world right now. Yeah. People just want to be rich and keep piling the riches and the riches and the riches. But I feel like there is a way to develop Africa in a way that is beneficial for Africans. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, these people can still do business with us. They can just let us move forward. But the reason they're not doing that is because they are afraid of black retribution. They're afraid, if black people have a minute of power, they would inflict what they have, we would inflict on them what they have inflicted on us. Get me? And I feel like that on their side, that's just something that they need to deal with. You get me? Because, you know,
I'm gonna read this here from the book that I mentioned earlier. Yeah, I might read a couple things from it, to be honest. And he says in the forward to the English edition, he says he's talking about certain you know, configurations of the different states. Yeah. What's it called? And he says the CEAO, including Senegal, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Mali, Mauritania, Upper Volta, Togo, Benin, and the CEDEAO, and I can't remember what these acronyms stand for, so forgive me. Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Mali, Senegal, Upper Volta, Niger, Togo, Sierra Leone, and Guinea are recent creations in West Africa, but no less fragile, than the rest of Africa, is basically saying. All of them are giants with feet of clay, engaged in trying to square the circle, to achieve meaningful economic unity without political union. No one wants to make the necessary sacrifice to achieve political unity. All hope to gain the benefits of economic integration without sacrificing the selfish interests of their governing groups on the altar of African unity. And so basically what he's saying is what is stopping the unity of Africans today is the fact that there are certain interests in the continent that want to maintain the colonial borders on the continent, which are insufficient. They are not sufficient for political development. They're not sufficient for economic development. But what is happening is that because people want to hold on to their little enclave of Africa and the power that they assume that they have, people are trying to form economic relations without collapsing the borders and forming proper political unions. And that is exactly what is taking place in Africa today with the African Union. That is exactly what is taking place today with the African Union. Sheikh Anta Diop has another book called The Cultural Unity of Black Africa. It was written before this one, yeah, in which he is substantiating the case, yeah, for the concept of a collectivized, unified African culture, yeah, one that is not separate, distinct, tribalistic, and antagonistic, as we have been characteristically taught, as the proponents of anti-Africanism and anti-African unityism would have us believe, that Africa is a place where all these different hundreds and thousands of groups, you know, live and can't get along and have been warring for thousands of years. You know what I'm saying? No, contrary to popular belief, yeah, that is not the case. And even where discord is present, yeah, there are avenues for overcoming that through an understanding of the cultural unity of Black Africa. And I'm just vexed that I wasn't able to get Baba Professor Kwesi Pratt on yet, because we're still working on that. You know what I mean? But he had got into that, you know, most explicitly using the example of language. Yes, student of life, the cultural unity of Black Africa is not quite in print at the moment, so it's very expensive to get. It's very expensive to get, but you can get it for about £100 and something. Yeah, can get it for £100 and something right now. Every now and then you'll find a copy in a Black bookshop or something. But yeah, but if you can't get that, because I do know that Black Africa is possible to get at the moment. Yeah, to check this one out, because you know what I mean. As far as a practical program, this is where it's at. Cultural unity is more philosophical. It's more dealing with the culture of peoples and an explanation of that. You know, and it might be considered, and I don't like this terminology, but it might be considered what anthropology in the European academic sense. But we don't call it anthropology in the African sense. We call it cultural science. Yeah, so it's a book of cultural science. Anthropology in the European academic sense, but we don't call it witness. Witness. By the way,
good evening, everybody. Pleasure to hear and see you all today.
Yo, bro. Shaka, man. There's this guy on here. I don't know, man. I don't know if he's gonna like porn bomb you or something. He's just playing like your video on his computer, and if I'm just feeling kind of
all right.
I'm still.
What are they trolls in the thing?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
All right, I'm
a guy called Yaha Idris.
Yeah, Yaha Idris, speak now, forever hold your peace or get dashed out the chat. How about that?
Yeah, and Yaha Idris, man muted you because there was bare feedback coming.
Yeah, for real. So if you're serious about the thing and you're not trolling, speak now. I'm gonna give you a chance, and if not, you're gonna get dashed.
Are you COINTELPRO?
You're gonna get dashed out, my lord.
We don't deal with COINTELPRO in this place. So
all right, Yaha Idris, you've got 15 seconds to speak.
Yo, brother Shaka, yeah. You see that book about the Black federal states?
Yeah.
Can you put it? Can you put it in the back chat, like the title of it, please?
Cool.
And brother Shaka, I was gonna say this. I feel like it's pretty simple, you know what I mean? Because anyone who cares about their people, right?
Yeah.
Or cares about the people that they're in charge of, or they say they're the leader or whatever, they gonna run it righteous. They're gonna make sure everyone's eating, everyone's got food, clothing, and shelter, right?
Yes, sir.
And I'm saying our leaders, it's as simple as this, brother. We can play, you know, talk, intellectualize it, this, that, whatnot. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, all our leaders, every Black country is infiltrated, and every leader in every Black country on the planet is what, and every leader is taking that, you know, they're in the back pocket of the goddamn devil, bro. they listen, they do the best interest, they work for the best interest of the European, of the Europe,
Yes,
of
sir.
the Jews, everyone. You understand?
Yes, sir.
All the wicked entities on the planet, brother. We can't play no game. This devil will never leave. He will never leave Africa because there's resources in Africa that he can't get anywhere else. He can't make these mobile phones with the vibrator. He needs that cobalt. You know what I mean? He ain't gonna leave that. So that's gonna, if we say for us, the blacks were to take over Africa, it's gonna be constant war.
Yeah.
You'll never destroy Africa, but that's one thing we've got to understand, that he could never drop an atom bomb if all of us were to defend Africa. Like, he would have to reason with us.
Definitely.
You'd have to.
And this is the point, yeah, that people are missing, yeah. When we speak about African identity and the purpose that it's designed to serve, in one sense, yeah, apart from the cultural unity aspect, and the return to home and repatriation, it's self-defense, yeah. Because one of the lessons that we learn from history is that the enslavement period would not have been as devastating as it was if we were more united than we were. You know what I'm saying? On the continent and throughout the diaspora, yeah. And so it's self-defense as well, yeah. It's also one of the things that I didn't go into with regards to the Omawale Malcolm X quote that I ended with, when he talked about the Western imperialists and colonialists being fearful of Africanism. Yeah, it's because they understand that Africanism or African unity, in a global sense, when that becomes a global expression, yeah, of political and economic development,
it becomes a force like communism.
It becomes a force that ends, it puts an end to European economic development in the world. And
dominance.
And dominance in the world. It ends it completely.
100%.
Yeah, they understand that. Yeah,
it would be like if it was enacted, yeah, it would be like you would have like the battle of the ideologies like you had between the Soviet Union and the West. Like it would be like that dynamic of a relationship, but of course the African side would be much more better equipped in a sense where, you know, we have more to offer the world than Soviet Union ever did. If that makes sense.
All right, Yaha Idris, I see you're coming. Right. I was trying to ask you to speak, my brother, and because you were, and it was suspected that you might be a troll. So I was asking for you to speak, and we wasn't hearing from you. So if you do want to come in,
stand as well, brothers. Yeah, a lot of this
one sec, bro. One sec. The brother in the chat is asking why I cut him off. It looked like he wanted to make a contribution. Yeah, I was asking, bro. I did ask, and I did get the 15 seconds countdown, and I wasn't hearing anything. So I apologize. I don't wait. When you dash somebody out the chat, they can't come back in, can they? So let me see if I can. You might have to send me your email, bro. Yeah. So if you send me an email, send me your email. I'm gonna put my email in the chat right about now. Send me your email and I'll send you the link. Yeah. I was gonna look off the show soon, but because you're being humble in that, I will stay on until you're able to come through. And then yeah, we'll take it from there. All right. So I apologize, bro. No, but bro, I was asking you to speak in it, so I apologize if there was a misunderstanding. So email me your email address and I'll add you to the chat. All right, I'll add you to the chat. Go ahead, my brother. I forgot.
Abel,
that's the one. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that we gotta understand, you know, a lot of the technology that this devil be making, ain't good technology, bro. Especially with the Wi-Fi's killing all the bees and them thing that they help purify our air with their pollen in them way there. You see what I'm saying? The trees and stuff like that. So really, it wouldn't be sustainable in terms of the wildlife and nature if we kept on with the 5G and we went in Africa and we did what the white man does with Europe and, you know, turning everything into a concrete jungle. It wouldn't work, brother. Well, you know what I'm saying? I would say the best thing for our people to do is find somewhere that is fertile, ain't got no resources, and be left alone without this goddamn beast, bro. You know, let him have it, because he gonna end up killing himself anyway. And
I also want to add here that there is no dichotomy, like in terms of people that affirm an African identity, there is no dichotomy between fighting for Africa and fighting for Africans wherever you are at the moment. Like, nobody of all the people, the activists, the movements that I've raised earlier, none of them, said that we shouldn't fight for Africans where we are at, and only fight for Africans on the continent. This is nonsense. This is a complete fabrication, a complete straw man, a complete red herring, a complete smokescreen from people understanding the proper ideology that we're dealing with. I've already given you the example, 2 examples of the people that I read out. One was Martin DELANY, who was had actually signed a treaty, with Yoruba chiefs, and when he got back to America, the Civil War broke out, so he realized he had to be on point. These beasts were going in on a program to re-enslave Africans, so he realized he had to fight. Omowale Malcolm X traveled to Africa, spent 6 months traveling around Africa, and he made various different linkages with African activists on the ground and governments, and he put forward a program that would fight for Africans where we are at, while we are linking, with our mother continent and our brothers and sisters on the continent. So there's no dichotomy, and people need to stop putting forward this fallacious argument. You know what I'm saying? I know I'm going in, but if anybody disagrees with me, if anybody got fire for Shakara, feel free to come through in it. Don't feel free in it. You know what I'm saying?
I was just gonna ask you a question, bro.
Yeah, go ahead.
I hear a lot of Negroes from America be lying. I feel like they're lying, but I know that, I've seen your credentials, and I know that you're a man of, I've seen you in speakers, kind of know that you're the master when it comes down to the Marcus Garvey teaching. And I feel like I've read a lot of Marcus Garvey books. I've never heard of this stuff that mans are saying. People keep saying that he was a Mason. You know what I mean? And if he was a Mason, because at that time I would say that Masonry on a holistic level, because in America it was Negroes just copying what white folks did, But after integration, I would say, definitely Masonry in the black side got infiltrated after the civil rights in America. But a lot of people like to say how Marcus Garvey was a Mason. The only thing I know about him and Masonry is Dad was a stonemason. I never known that Marcus Garvey was an actual Mason. I would like to see proof. I never heard him say it. I've never seen any books, so I'm wondering where these Negroes be pulling it out.
But we got to be very careful of how we explain Masonry, because on the black side of thing, it was a form of organizing. Because
right. That's why I was saying you were copying that. Yeah.
And that's where, if you study into forms of Prince Hall and people like that, you would realize that that was the only options that they had to organize and to come together. Because if they didn't come together, you wouldn't even hear them going to Liberia or Sierra Leone. You wouldn't have heard of Oluwaseun. There's many of these guys that you would never have heard of. And Garvey, there might be a possibility he may not have got this ideology and may not have done what he was doing in the first place.
Yes, because I know that you had in Haiti Empire, you had Dessalines, and who's that the other one? Toussaint. Toussaint went back to France because he was a Gayson. And he thought that they were his brothers. But when he went over there, they killed him. Now, Prince Hall wasn't wicked at the start, but now any man who's a Prince Hall Gayson, I wouldn't deal with, brother. They work for the best interest of the devil today. Prince Hall Masons, their charter goes back to Britain.
Did you say Prince Gayson or something?
Anyone who's got a European charter for your Masonic lodge, you working for the beast, bro. You protect.
But then that's a misconception, though, don't you think? Because if he was really working for the Europeans, they would have helped them when they went to Sierra Leone.
Right.
Help too.
Let me answer Brother Abel's question. Yeah. First of all, Brother Abel, I've got a couple of videos in my catalog on this channel. Yeah, whereby I was debating certain man about the Marcus Garvey thing.
Yeah, and you told me, brother, is that true? Because I remember seeing you debate that, but I didn't hear you actually say yes or
no. Yeah, no. All right. So there's a few things here. It is possible that Marcus Garvey was a Prince Hall Mason. Yeah. His second wife suggests this in her book Garvey and Garveyism. And what it is that there was a member of the UNIA who was an elder to Marcus Garvey, who was definitely a Prince Hall Mason. His name was John Edward Bruce. Yeah. John Edward Bruce was one of the key activists on the scene in America before Marcus Garvey got to America. Prolific organizer. Yeah, prolific organizer. What did you hear the beginning of my presentation, bro? Today?
No, I didn't hear the start of it, my bro.
Right, okay, so I'm going to share something with you in a sec, yeah. Okay. But in the sense of you're correct in the sense that the Prince Hall Masonic Lodge did have some connection with Britain at one point, but they actually broke away from that at some point in the 1700s, yeah. Somewhere within the first 10 years, I forget the date, but yeah, that tie was severed from quite early in the development of the Masonic Lodge. And that
I know that the Prince Hall Masons started off with righteous intent. So I know the original man, Prince Hall, was a righteous man. You know,
yeah, I know, yeah, I hear what you're saying. But what I'm saying though is that even their connection to the lodge in Britain did not continue. Yeah, in within the lifetime of Prince Hall, it was that tie was severed. They went their own separate way, and they had their own independent thing. So yeah, so that's my, and I'm not claiming to be an expert on Prince Hall Masonry. I'm just saying that's my understanding of Prince Hall's journey and the thing. But I do want to share this though. One sec, Brother Terry, just on this point, for those who weren't here at the beginning of the conversation, can everybody see my screen? Let's say yeah if you can see my screen on your video.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah,
but enlarge it a bit more because they can't see the writing.
Yeah, go on, brother. Yeah.
Is it large now? Yeah,
we can see it. Good. Go on.
Right. So this is the petition, yeah, that was led by Prince Hall on behalf of the African Masonic Lodge, yeah, in Boston, Massachusetts, in 1787, yeah, and it says, we or our ancestors have been taken from our dear connections and brought from Africa and put into a state of slavery in this country, from which unhappy situation we have been lately in some measure delivered by the new constitution which has been adopted by this state. Yeah, this is after 1776, so they're referring to that, the American Constitution, or by a free act of our former masters. But we are yet to find, but we yet find ourselves in many respects in very disagreeable and disadvantageous circumstances, most of which must attend us so long as we and our children live in America. This and other considerations, which we need not here particularly mention, induce us earnestly to desire to return to Africa, our native country, which warm climate is much more natural and agreeable to us, and for which the God of nature has formed us, and where we shall live among our equals and be more comfortable and happy than we can be in our present situation. At the same time, may have the prospect of usefulness to our brethren there. Goes on. This leads us humbly to propose the following plan to the consideration of this honorable court. The soil of the native country is good and produces the necessities of life in great abundance. There are large tracts, yeah, of cultivated lands, which if proper application were made for them, it is presumed might be obtained and would be freely given for those to settle upon, who shall be disposed to return to them when this shall be affected by a number of blacks. Yeah, so basically he's just basically saying that the Africans who he's organizing with have developed their own personnel to go to Africa, chart the land, speak to the people, come to agreements, yeah, and so they don't want that part of the process to be dominated by the American government. They want to govern that part themselves, but they want reparation from the American government. So it goes on. These must be furnished with necessary provisions for the voyage. The American government must provide them provisions for the voyage, as well as farming utensils necessary to cultivate the land, and with the materials which cannot be at present obtained there, which is in Africa due to underdevelopment, and which will be needed to build houses and mills. Yeah. So the point is that this is what Prince Hall and the Prince Hall Masons were doing in the 1700s. Yeah. So throughout being associated with Prince Hall Masonry from the 17th throughout the 1800s into the early 1900s was being associated with a black liberation movement in the eyes of most people. You know what I'm saying? Now, you are probably correct. Yeah, and I couldn't tell you what the Prince Hall Masons are doing today in that respect. But definitely at that time, the image and the program of the Prince Hall, or the people that were organizing with Prince Hall, was that kind of agenda.
Right. Well, I mean, the ones today,
Yeah.
if you're in the Prince Hall Lodge, that's a big thing. That's Boulay and all them man there.
Yeah.
But them man there working for the best interest of the devil today. All of them. If you're Prince Hall, that's recognized.
Yes,
you know what I mean? And you got a lot. They got Scottish Charter, European Charter on them, man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Now, if you're clandestine, yeah, I don't mind the clandestine Mason. That's you and your boys. You're doing your little thing. Them man there can, you know what I mean? That's cool. But when you're Prince Hall and you got that British chart, that means the devil can go up in your lodge. The enemy can go in your lodge. You can't even go in their lodge.
Man, I hear that still. Now,
Diddy in there, man. There.
And you know what? One day I'm gonna have to do a show on this Prince Hall Mason with him, because it's come up bare times. So we have to go in on it, yeah. But I'm conscious that witnesses joined us the conversation, and he ain't really spoken yet. So if you got something to say with this, feel free.
I did, but then I got lost in the source of the Freemasonry, so I've lost track about what you were teaching us about. So
you weren't here from the beginning of the conversation?
No, unfortunately not.
I feel like I should have started at 9 o'clock, you know.
No, I missed that, and I was catching up to speed. But then when we went down this whole Mason thing,
all right. So just to repeat once more, I'm gonna probably close the show soon. But by the way, Yahya Idris, I've sent you the invitation. Yeah. So once again, apologies, and feel free to join the conversation. I'm gonna share the link in the chat one more time for anybody who wants to come in and join the conversation. Anybody who feels that they're a bad man and want to come test you lot can feel free to do that too. You know what I'm saying? Feel free to come test, man, on what it is that I have shared with you today. Disagree with me.
One word to help though, I would say to you, Chuck, if someone does come bring that Masonic talk now,
yeah,
you would have to tell me if he's Prince Hall. Now, if he's Prince Hall, then we know that Marcus Garvey was working for the beast. Now, if he's Prince Hall always had their honorary, you know, they got a list of their members.
Yes.
Always keep a list of their members. So if Marcus Garvey's name's in that list, then we know he was one. If they can't show me that, and have to show me where he's on the list, because it will be on the list.
That's my thing, bro. So all right, there's two things there. Yeah, the people that have debated on Marcus Garvey and his Prince Hall thing are yet to show me any evidence. Like, I have actually presented more evidence of Marcus Garvey's link to Prince Hall than they.
I saw that.
So the reason why I have not gone in on it yet is because I'm waiting for man to show me the evidence. Yeah, and because man are telling me that he's connected to all certain what's it called, the Jesuits them in. And so I'm saying, man, have to show me evidence of these things, innit? So until man show me evidence of these things, I'm not going down the road with you lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, show me the evidence.
They're the new one, brother Shaka.
But the one thing I would say is that list that you've got is not all the masonry. Not all masonries have put their names down.
But at the same time, one of the things that Amy Jakes Garvey says is that he became a Mason under the influence of General Bruce, but he did not attend Masonic meetings.
Yeah. They utilized it. They utilized it to able to influence into the European, like our.
European. What it was is that some of the Prince Hall Masons were also in Liberia. Yeah. And so and
as I said to you, I've spoken to the Free African Society in Sierra Leone.
Yes.
So I know the whole group.
Yes.
And as I said to you, lodges are many. There's many houses. And many houses nowadays work for themselves in its entirety. But what you would find, as I said to you, like for instance, some masonries would able to have an influence of with the Europeans in forms of finance, in forms of treasury, because they had to able to dealing with certain things which they could not do with the general public, as in the black people at that time.
But
you know why I would say I don't believe that.
Let me just recap the thing for the sake of people that witness who are just joining the conversation. But Brother Witness, basically what I've been doing today is explaining the origin and development of African identity from the 1700s up until basically the present. Or I shouldn't really say the 1700s up until the 1960s was more specifically, but relating that to the present. And I was challenging a lot of the anti-African identity, anti-Pan-African propaganda that is out there, and correcting a lot of the misconceptions that are put forward by people who have an anti-African and an anti-African identity projection. One of the groups, though, that I did not mention, it's a controversial one, this one. One of the groups that I did not mention though in my roll call, I mentioned the anti-Hotep people them. I mentioned certain elements of the Black Hebrews, and I say not all Black Hebrews. Shout out to the African Hebrew Israelites under the leadership of Abba Ben Ami. But there are many Black Hebrews who are anti-African in their pronouncements and projections. I mentioned the Aboriginal movement, yeah, the people that say we are not Africans, we are just the indigenous people of the Americas, again anti-African, and also the ADOS, yeah, movement that has sprung up. The narrative, the consistent narrative of the ADOS movement is one that is anti-African and anti-Pan-Africanist, yeah. So I was challenging. Well, I wasn't even directly challenging, to be honest with you. Within the presentation I was given, I was just putting the actual history of Africans who affirmed and abided by and projected an African identity in the Americas and on the African continent as well from that time. And so basically that's what we've been discussing, yeah? So what's wrong with being African, kings and queens? What is wrong with being African? I may change the title of this video to the power of African identity. But yeah,
can you please tell me, would you see our cousins in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, would you see them as being part of us Africans as well?
I must admit, my geography on Andaman and Nicobar is not particularly pronounced.
You mean the Jara? Of course.
Yeah, the Jarawa, or our cousins in Fiji and Papua New Guinea.
So one sec. Where are you saying Witness?
Papua New Guinea or Fiji.
Oh yes, definitely. But okay. and they would agree. They would affirm that too.
All right. So the whole Pan-Africanist thing is encompassing everything from the Americas through Africa, through Asia, through South Pacific, uniting the whole diaspora to see and view themselves as African. Yes, I would argue. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily has always been the case. I think that because all the movements evolve, so when we develop more of an understanding of the fact that certain people are our people, if that makes sense. That's what I'm saying. And I'm not even saying that all Pan-African work right about now is encompassing that full spectrum, because, for example, that it's easier, or it should be easier, it's proven difficult to unite, let's say, the American continent. Yeah, and so some people think that it's wiser to start there and then go into Papua New Guinea, because and Australia, and the Pacific. 51 something or another, 51, 56. Please mute your mic. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. The food does look nice still, but please mute your mic. All right. All right. So I hope that answers the question, brother. Witness. Yes, it does. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Brother Yahya Idris.
Yeah, man. Can you hear me?
Yes, King. Go on. So apologies for misunderstanding, King.
Yeah, I was listening attentively, but there was it was my fault actually, because I put on too many tabs, and so voices was crossing over. So I thought it was other people talking. I heard you say something, yeah, but I heard other people talking, and I didn't want to talk over nobody. No problems, bro. No problems. That was what it was. Pertaining to your show, I really appreciate it, because from I was very young, I've had this. I've known that I'm African. I mean, come on, anybody with any sense knows. You get somebody from over there, so either they're stolen or kidnapped, or they get up on their leave of their own accord. That's where they come from. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't understand what's so hard to understand about that. But your show was very informative. There's a lot of things I didn't know. A lot of things I didn't know, and I'm a grown man. I've got books. I mean, if I showed you a little a little snapshot of my office, you will see that I got books, I got a library, I read, you know, I like to read, I don't watch TV, I ain't got time for that rubbish, it's programming. But anyway, the angle that I wanted to discuss was, I mean, all of this that you're talking about is in the past.
Yes.
And it's important to know your past.
Yes.
Because if you don't know your past, you ain't gonna really know your present.
Yes.
You ain't gonna know where the flow is going. You ain't gonna understand how things really work.
Yes.
But at the same time, what's more important than being aware of your past is knowing yourself, knowing the element of good and evil, as in doing unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Now, they might want to say this comes from some Bible. No, it comes from some Quran. No, it comes from the inward person. Because if somebody slaps your child, no matter who they are, they might have a gun, and even then you may put yourself up in line to get shot to defend your picnic.
Yeah.
So you know what's right from what's wrong, because you know what you like for yourself from what you don't like for yourself. And it's that criteria simply. And if we really want to know who we are, I would suggest, I'm not telling anybody what to do, but I would suggest that we sit still and allow thoughts to pass through your mind until there's no thoughts. That's when you've come to the core. And then you can start to ask questions. And them questions will be so clear, it might even frighten you. Because when you sit still, you cut through all, you know, like these people, these Europeans, I don't even like calling them Europeans. I don't like calling them white people, because in reality, they got their humanity from us. I don't even think they belong in this planet. I think they came down because it's written in some books that I've read in the past, and it makes sense with what I can see in the world. Now, how I personally relate to truth is, if I've read it in a book and I can't see it in real life, it's not real. If I haven't read it in a book, but I can see it in real life, it's real. So if I can see it in myself, and then the book can relate to me, i.e. I can relate to what's being said in the book, then yeah, that's a form of reality. Now these what's the best word? These human beasts, yeah, that came down. The reason why I call them that, and I'm not being racist, because they're a different element to us. And we've become accustomed, like them have this old saying, but we're not looking at these old sayings and making sense of it. It's very simple. Like our grandparents used to tell us things like, if you lie down with puppy, if you lie down with dog, you get up with fleas. if you play with puppy, you lick your face. Yeah. Meaning, familiarity breed contempt. People pass them place. If you lie down with people, you catch them ways. Yeah? We've been around these people a long time. I would hasten to say we're not the Africans that we were. It's in our DNA, but there is some other stuff in our DNA. And we need to differentiate what the difference is. I heard everything that you've been saying, and what the content that the people, the brothers and sisters have been saying. And nobody's wrong, because there's a lot to deal with. Nobody's wrong. The Sufi brother that was talking, he's correcting what he's saying. The other brother that was saying it's not about that right now, he's right. Everybody's got their standpoints because we're all individuals. But for us to come to unity, us to have a form of unity, we have to have this thing called self-respect, which will grow out into general respect for our own kind. Right now, the evidence of what we're talking, the strength of it, then you can see it in our community. Our kids are killing each other. They're not even going out to kill the real enemy, they're killing each other. They look at them one another and hate them one another. If you're not in my gang, you're an enemy. Could be his own cousin, him get killed, he murder him cousin, and then later on him say one of him family dead, and when he go low and be all like him murdered somebody and him in the castle. And he didn't know, because he didn't know. Could it be his own brother? Because some of we have picked me and them don't know them one another. Yes. You know what I'm saying, right? Yes. This is the back end of what they've done to us. However, they haven't crushed us because of conversations like what's going on right now. That's evidence that they haven't crushed us.
Yes,
We're
sir.
still here. We're talking about regrouping. It's like them chop the body up and the blood with our floor. But
Yes, sir.
the blood will start to congregate and then make scab, and then the thing will heal and left scar.
Well, you
We
know
need to understand these things.
what I would say, yeah, is in relation to this whole issue of African identity. Yeah, one of the things that I didn't touch on properly was probably the most developed, yeah, and long-lasting expression when I was talking about Ethiopianism, is Rastafari. Yeah,
I got my issues with Rastafari. I was Rasta for a very long time in my life. But anyway, go on.
That's fine, but outside of that, because obviously, and I would say that I have some issues with how Rastafari evolved. Yeah. Or some of the things that evolved in Rastafari, some of the things that manifested within it. But that's to me, that's all part of the process. Yeah, we're coming from. Many of us wouldn't have a certain level of consciousness if it wasn't Rastafari.
That's the key word, consciousness.
That's what I'm saying. And Rastafari is responsible for bringing a lot of us, a whole heap of us, yeah, to a level of consciousness. So
I don't know about that. I would say that we were gonna be conscious anyway. It was just a methodology that could allow you to focus on something.
That is the point. That is the point that I'm making. Yeah. That was the conduit through which many of us were focusing on certain things. Yeah, it through a Rastafari understanding, right? And I'm saying, and so one of the key things why I'm mentioning that at the moment, yeah, is when it comes to this African identity thing.
Rasta's the only one that's really pushing that, to be real.
It's not even just pushing it, but it's about the impact and what it represented. Yeah, we were in a situation. Yeah, let's go up to the root. Yeah, Jamaica, 1930s. Yeah, is a colony of Britain. Yeah, my grandmother and them. It was not uncommon for them to have pictures of
the Queen and them was.
Yeah. At the time it was King George. Yeah. The boy when they tell us is Jesus Christ. Yeah. Well, right. so we got the images on the wall of our political ascendancy and our spiritual ascendancy on the wall. Yeah. And Rastafari comes and said, fire and lightning for that. We're born white Jesus and we're born King George.
Who said that?
What's it called? Rastafari.
Haile Selassie said that?
No, Leonard P. Howell said that.
Oh, you mean the brother that formed the movement?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm talking about the impact, yeah. Of what they were dealing with. And I'm saying that. So what that did, and they affirmed an African identity in allegiance to the emperor in Ethiopia. And what that did, yeah, was that it severed the allegiance to King George.
And the white man.
And the white man in general.
I can agree with that. Shocker. My family, my family's Jamaican.
Yes.
And I got Rasta man, proper Italist Rastas out in Jamaica. I got Rastas that call the white man the devil.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they were the first to be calling it before even Nation of Islam was calling the white man the devil. That's what the Rastas used to teach. And my Rasta cousin in Jamaica, them man, they don't even read books. He said books is Babylon.
Burn the book, fire burn,
TV burn, everything.
Burn up.
That's a real Rasta. Them man is real Rasta. To me, he's the realest Rasta.
You know what I mean?
Burn out book, Richard. I told him, "Where's your Bible?" He said, "What? What you mean more Bible?"
My virgin, I hear that. That's a good point that you raised there as well.
So the point I'm making is because you talk about knowing yourself, innit? And I'm saying that
the man they know themselves to an extent. May I tell you that?
But beyond that, though, because this isn't just about Rastafari in particular, you know. The point that's being made, yeah, is that
Africanism.
But more to the point is that we will never know ourselves if we are holding on to and trying to maintain our tie to
the slave master, the whip star.
Right, and I'm saying that, right, and I am saying that on an identity level, what they've done, yeah, since the 1900s is try, especially since World War II, tried their hardest to keep us identifying with them and their identity.
Yeah, subdued, mentally subdued.
Right, so
once they have you like that, you can't do nothing because everything you're gonna do, like Like even sitting on this call right now, I'm very dubious about that because I know this is their technology. That's why them call it technology. Call them tech it.
Yes, sir.
You see me?
Yes, sir.
So that they can spy on us.
Yes, sir.
And when we're coming up, snip us.
Yes, sir.
So I'm like, you know what? I'm just trying to make money right now because I know that we need to have our own hall so we can go in there and have our own bug-proof building. And we can sit in there for days if we want and converse and say what we need to say. Go away and get food and come back. I'll cook food and stay in this and have that.
Yes,
this is the kind of things that I'm working on.
Yes, sir.
But I'm just an individual.
Yes, sir.
I'm just a cell in the body. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
And sometimes other cells will want to attack cells in the body. That's why you have dis-ease. You see me? So I'm looking at all of these angles. The more I listen, the more I'm encouraged though, because you know what the world outside is showing me is that these little thugs don't have no sense and they're killing their one another. And some of them for just dead because them are kill people. Them for just dead and wipe out. Now tell you straight. But coming in here and hearing the different levels of man's minds and sisters' minds, I'm encouraged. I'm telling you straight.
Speaking of that,
I don't even go out. I've got my samurai sword. I'm looking at my samurai sword right now. You get me? You know why I got they go swing it. But at the realest thing, is I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I really want more of this. I want to see our people striving towards the thing that I know why you came on here and did this. I can tell from the content, and I'm loving it. And that's what I come really to say. It's not a matter of me being a scholar, come up here, come tell you nothing. No, it's not that. I just want to give you some encouragement and to kind of give you some fair warning because I know just the people in Panya talk are listening.
No, we know this, King. We know this.
Just remember the most. And another thing that I kind of think when I hear the man them talking about the God and the Most High, one thing they know from my little boy, you know, I thought about it and it makes sense to me.
Yes.
Can a human being, no matter how majestic you want to call him, can a human being make a blade of grass from nothing? The answer is, you tell me. What's the answer? From nothing, like no air, no water, no material. Can you formulate a blade of grass? The answer is no. So if you can't form a blade of grass, then you can't form a speck of dust. And if you can't form a speck of dust, you can't make air, you can't make fire, you can't make sky. So how can a man be God? Come on, man, let's talk sense for once. Yeah, let's look in ourselves and stop taking the Most High, bringing him down. Let's raise him up and look at ourselves and realize that there is more to us than what we even realize. We don't even know ourselves.
I hear you. Your guy is somewhere else in the reasoning,
The reason why I did that is because I was listening to a lot of what's being said, and it makes sense and it's really good content, but we still need to be anchored in some reality.
It's cool. And I'm only saying that because there is subjects that we can go into next time.
There is. It's a life. It's a life where I live.
So yeah. So I don't want to exhaust them subject there right now.
But I'm really encouraged by because it's by accident, you know. I'm in a group and I see a post come up and I say, let me go here with them money. I say.
We'll give thanks still. You
see me? So yeah, I'm glad that I managed to hear what you've been saying, and I'm interested to know more because Black Studies. I was learning that when I was incarcerated. Okay. And there's a brother that really knew some stuff, was showing me some stuff, and I'll tell you, it changed me straight away.
Yes,
like I started to hear it. It's like you never know, so you're hungry until you see food.
Yes, sir.
You see me? You never know, so you're thirsty until you get some water to drink.
Yes, sir.
Some real water. You know what I mean? And that was it for me, man. So anytime I hear the brothers them coming up with something, I'm encouraging that, man, all the way. We need to have our own schools. I know a brother down the road still from me. He's got a school. He set up the school, a black school from I think it was 85, you know. The brother's struggling because there ain't nobody to come and help him run the school.
Yes, sir.
And it's a black school for black people, and his school is running.
Yes, sir.
So I'm putting out a shout to say, well, boy, if there's any teachers out there that want a job, that want to help our next generation come up, I've told the brother already that I'm going to do something for him.
Yes, sir.
You know, so I'm giving that shout out as well. So if anybody wants to know, contact you got my email, contact me, let me know.
Definitely.
Because it's all about helping with one another. This is what this whole thing's about. It's not so much about the past. What they've done to us is in our DNA. We know what they've done to us because when you record it, when you start talking it, it's not strange to us.
Yes, sir.
So that's the evidence.
Bro,
we need to do something now.
I want to open up the conversation,
bro. But you know,
one second, brother Abel, because brother Abel and brother Yaya, I've been talking for quite some time here. So
Yeah, I'm not saying no more. Make them talk.
It's like we just want to open up the conversation and see if anybody else.
Yeah.
As well, you mentioned something about sisters. Yeah, so if a sister want to come in, then
yeah, man. We couldn't dare if it wasn't for a sister. You know, we need a mother.
Indeed.
And the earth need a mother too.
Big up to Chief Drino. Big up to Chief Drino. For hitting up the super chat. Give thanks for that, my brother. I do truly appreciate it. Says, what's good, family? Big ups to the Pan-African family across the waters. God is within us and we're God's. Greetings from Australia. Blows not. Australia. I am me. Australia's locked in. That's what you call Pan-Africanism. Australia. Yes, King. Give thanks for your contribution and give thanks for hitting up the super chat. I am most appreciative. But yeah, I'm gonna share the link one more time, yeah, and we're just willing some feminine energy into the conversation right about now. But yeah, any of the other brothers on there wanna jump in and say a word. I want to wrap up soon as well, you know, because we've been on for 3 hours now, you know what I mean? So yeah. Witness, Terry, William, Raz, anybody wanna say a thing?
I just think it needs to be taught more from an educational point of view. Until that's done, people won't have the mindset of what an African is. So it needs to be done in African countries, but especially here with the home study groups.
Yeah.
The sooner the youngest people start learning about African and being what an African is, then we won't really need to have these discussions in the future.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And yeah, that's kind of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. You know, there was a point at which I was developing a course in what I was calling Black Power Studies, and just looking at the different ways that we have responded to oppression and different things that we have built, yeah, in the midst of it, and the purposes and how we did it and them kind of things there. To have a more scientific approach to how we're doing our things today. You know what I mean? Because it's all well and good, you know, we know Marcus Garvey did. But we don't know how we did it, and we have no idea how we would need to update it to make it effective in today's world. And so and I'm still developing that course. It's still in development, but we'll get there. And as well, what will happen before that though is the course in African-centered education, and I'm going to be doing a full live presentation on that at some point in the next couple of months, looking at concepts and methodologies, frameworks, you know, and axiology in terms of African-centered education and how to implement it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I would say, you know, in its perspective is that we need to concentrate within understanding the African within us than the African of the landmass.
Mm-hmm. Now you've made that point, yeah, and you brought me back to something that I intended to say. There is a book called Pan-Africanism, Black Nationalism. And it is about it's a compilation of papers that came out of a particular conference of African youth in the early 2000s, and they had various scholars in at the conference, and one of the papers was delivered by the elder Kwesi Pra, and he made exactly the point that you just made, which is that because people tend to focus on the unity of the 54 states that are on the continent at the moment, and they forget to talk about the people. And essentially, Pan-Africanism is about unity of people before it is about unity of nation states. In fact, one could argue, and many do argue, that it's not about the unity of nation states at all. Yeah, it's what I'm saying, as in it is not about the unity of the nation states as they are presently configured on the continent at the moment. So the issue is, from a grassroots perspective, organizing and uniting the people. Yeah, and so whenever you hear, yeah, you know, the people are talking about Pan-Africanism, and if I wasn't organized enough to bring up the quote. Yeah, but whenever you hear people talking about Pan-Africanism being outdated, yeah, 9 times out of 10, yeah, they are working with an outdated or erroneous concept, yeah, of what Pan-Africanism is. Yeah, and that is just a fact. Yeah, if you hear anybody talking about Pan-Africanism and they're talking about the states, yeah, the lack of the fact that it's not viable because of the condition of the states in Africa at the moment. This is not a Pan-Africanist view, yeah, of Pan-Africanism. This is not a perspective that anybody who seriously and knows about Pan-Africanism would put forward. And if I can find this particular quote, I'll bring it to you shortly. Yeah, but it's very important. Thank you for bringing me back to that, brother Reggie. Very, very important.
Terry.
Sorry, Terry. That's why I say Reggie.
Yeah, because you know, it's the funniest thing is that we can all have a dialogue on here, there, and everywhere. And the one thing, like even when they say the year of the return, for me personally, the year of the return is coming back to yourself.
Yes, yes. And this is not to say, and don't get it twisted, the issue of nation states is not necessarily the issue of land. Land is a very different issue. Nation states are political configurations, and the nation state on Africa, as it stands at the moment, is a colonial creation. Yeah, it's a colonial creation that, and if you look at, this is what this book is talking about: overcoming the pitfalls of that colonial configuration. Yeah, that's what this is talking about. Yeah, and
that's why when I talk like that is because you see, I've just got back from Brazil, and if you go to Brazil, you just think you're still in Africa. They still keep the old traditions. They still got the same ways of thoughts. They've still got the same way as even forms of villages. And they still got some parts of European places where they've created cities. But the old traditions are still there. And some traditions that even the African people have lost.
Hear this now, yeah, from the book that I'm talking about, yeah. Right, check out to the up says the proliferation of political leaders. Yeah, so this is coming back to what Abel was saying earlier in terms of how they put the political leaders in place. Yeah, the proliferation of political leaders is a specifically African fact of life, resulting from colonization by different imperial powers and the consequent breaking up into administrative territories of conquered regions. It constitutes a serious difficulty that will have to be taken into account in any attempt at African continental unification. No concrete way has yet been proposed that might lead inevitably and rapidly to a federation of African states with a partial or total surrender of local sovereignty. For all the fine public statements, multifarious individual and general interests are at work to make people cling to the established frontiers of the various territories. Yeah, and no one has ever suggested any sort of cartel of presidents or heads of states as an embryo, and that's probably true at the point at which he wrote this, of federal government, which might be broadened gradually as the various states become emancipated. This might be the way to provide a collective dictatorship within which no one chief of state would hold the top position, pending full independence of the continent. Individual states' interests could thus be safeguarded at the same time as African unity. So these are the kinds of problems that were trying to be solved in the 1950s. And what he just said relates to exactly what you just said, Terry, in terms of unification of people. Yeah, first and foremost, it's a grassroots message before it is a nation, or in spite of, yeah, a nation state configuration. You know what I mean? So yeah, family, I'm looking to wrap up the show still, you know what I'm saying? Because the sisters them don't look like them are come true still, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? You always give space for the sisters, and I always put out the word and say we invite the sisters on, and nobody don't look like they're gonna come and disagree with man, challenge man's point of view, you know what I mean? But I promise you, in the next few days there'll be bare people, particularly of an ADOS persuasion, killing the comment section. Because they tell, one thing I have to admire the ADOS for, you know, is that they're about that social media life, boy. Like, you can't say nothing about ADOS and they don't come tell you about yourself. You know what I mean? It's a very serious thing. Very, very serious thing. So, yeah.
But you got to see who's behind it.
Yeah, I'm not guided to that right now. Still, you know, as I say, you know.
I just want to say, when you have the opportunity, put the ADOS, yeah, right, into Google and see what you find.
Why?
That's for future reference.
Okay. Well, have I done that before? I've done so many things with regards to ADOS.
Because the association doesn't come up first. Something else comes up.
What's it called? Terry speaking in them cryptic terms where there's on them cryptic vibrations there, you know what I mean? Yeah, family. So yeah, I give thanks for all those who have tuned in, the silent listeners, those who have helped out in the chat, who have commented, the silent listeners, the haters, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to the haters as well. You know what I mean? We love you same way. Yeah, and I give thanks to you know, just the brothers and sisters out there. Let me send a special shout out to my brother Omawale Africa. He was in the chat earlier. I encourage all those who are listening to subscribe to his channel. He had a beautiful conversation the other day with an organization called Incobra, which is the most long-standing prolific reparations activist organization in the United States of America. And he had a conversation before that where he was delivering a presentation entitled Standing on the Pan-African Square. So I'm going to encourage everyone, yeah, to subscribe to brother Omowale Africa's channel. Yeah, he's another brother from the States who is putting forward some serious information. He's actually an organizer with Mambo Amamazama, who I had a good conversation with a few weeks ago. So check him out. I would also like you to subscribe to the channel of Sister African Esquire, African spelled with a K, Esquire, African Esquire, or just African ESQ, another powerful sister from across the waters doing serious work. And her organization, which is the Federation of African Liberation, again, African spelled with a K, the Federation of African Liberation, who are doing serious work. These are all people that have channels, yeah. And so this is our Pan-African network across the waters. Check out the Nation or Nation Kamit, yeah, Kamit, Nation Kamit, yeah, which is our brothers and sisters from West Africa but living in France. You know what I'm saying? Check out Afrocentricity International as well. You know what I'm saying? This is just a Pan-African network, yeah, of channels that are dispensing powerful information and also information about their works, yeah. You know what I mean? You know, powerful stuff, brothers and sisters. And I really just want to send a shout out to them, because these are brothers and sisters who have been, like myself, attempting to correct a lot of the misinformation out there about Pan-Africanism and this beautiful tradition that we inherit that has done so much, yeah, that has done so much to fight and develop, and people, our ancestors have made so many sacrifices with this movement on behalf of our people. So I do want to send us, I don't know if I'm missing anybody. Subscribe to Scattered Minds, my brother Scattered Minds, yeah. Is another brother from these shores, brother Scattered Minds, yeah. We want Scattered Minds. Subscribe to Scattered Minds channel, yeah. Encouraging everyone to subscribe to Scattered Minds channel. You know what I'm saying? If you don't know, now you know, kings and queens. I'm gonna see if I can find this quote from Professor Kwesi Pra.
And don't forget constructive convos.
Yeah, I did mention it earlier. Constructive convos, extremely important.
I'd like to ask you, maybe in the future you can give us a talk on when people or nations achieve Pan-Africanism, how can they hold on to it militarily and economically?
Brilliant point, my brother. Yeah, excellent point. And yeah, this is ongoing work. The history of Pan-Africanism is very complicated. It's what they call a protracted war. And so we've had victories, and we have lost some battles along the way. You know what I'm saying? And we shouldn't be disheartened because we've lost battles. It's like if you're in a war and you lose some battles, you don't stop fighting. You know what I'm saying? You continue the war. You know, and that's what it is. Right. I'm trying to find this quote from Professor Kwesi Pra. Right. A leading issue which needs attention in relationship between Pan-Africanism and sorry, no, that's not the part. The argument that Pan-Africanism means still today for us the unity of the African continent, in the first place, a unity of post-colonial states, and not, as I would say, and insist on the unity of it, or sorry, insist the unity of peoples whose history and culture derive from the continent and are conscious of this affinity and wish to develop these roots as the basis for social and economic emancipation of African people. My definition fundamentally recognizes the link with the diaspora as more important than the notion of continental unity per se, yes, which is essentially geographical. In other words, the unity of the greater part of this continent logically would emerge more as a consequence than a cause. Again, in other words, if people of African history and descent unite, that is, if the African nation unites, most of the continent of Africa will unite. That relates directly to what you just said, Brother Terry. You know what I mean?
And you know where it is. It's the programming, the education, and you know you should make them know as well. The only reason why Garvey failed, right, is because the Liberian government at the time, they took a check from the goddamn devil,
yeah,
and they didn't let him in. They didn't let him in. So they were bought and controlled. So when Garvey he didn't really understand the politics. He didn't really understand, from what reading. Also, there's a book that you should read, the intellectual, what's it called? The Intellectual Crisis in America back then, right? Before civil rights. He didn't really understand the politics, Garvey. My only criticism, he didn't really understand the politics in America with the, with the white man and the Americans, you know what I mean? He came at it more like, well, he's from Jamaica and it's much harder. And then he's seen that there's a bit more opportunity in America. So he was seeing it. You got to understand from where it's very hard to build anything in Jamaica. You know what I mean? You don't run no media, nothing. And most people believe what the media is. The media is strong. Yes, the Sephardic Jews runs the media in Jamaica even then. So when he was going to America, he wasn't really seeing the chains around his legs like, say, the Black American. You know what I mean? That's why he got into a lot of fights with Black American groups at that time, like we got the African Brotherhood. They were bought off by Zionist Jews, socialists, by their agenda. So that's the thing. That's how I know for certain that Garvey weren't a sellout, because he was fighting against this beast. This beast was sending guys against him. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know what I'm saying? And I was gonna say, yeah, and then we gotta remember, so we have to always keep telling these people when they say, well, it failed and this, that. If there was some righteous leaders in Africa, Pan-Africanism could go on. Yeah. But it can't happen as long as our leaders in every black country on the planet is bought and paid for and a puppet for the goddamn beast. Definitely, my brother. Definitely. Give thanks for that. And that's the battle that we have to overcome right about now. That's the battle that we have to overcome right about now, kings and queens. Give thanks for that, brother. Hey, well, I'm going to close up the conversation right now. Thank everyone for listening, as I was saying before, and we're going to continue this. You know what I'm saying? If you're listening to this afterwards and you need me to address anything more, feel free to let me know in the comment section, and we'll try to come back to that. We will try to come back to that, kings and queens. All right, we will try to come back to all of your comments and your suggestions for a further conversation. Tendam Wari, Uncle Justin Neb, life, prosperity, and health are spoken in the ancient Kemetic language. Rastafari Hotep, African power. African power for all African people.